see. First on the docket is public hearing for Coldbrook RV Resort LLC, change of manager. Are they present in the room? I can't.
No, I'm going to have to ask the select board to table that because they didn't complete all of the documents that they needed to in time.
Due to that information, I would make a motion to table any action to be taken on the Coldbrook RV Resort change of manager.
Yeah, I'll second that. And so it's just you and I still, so I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are the Hightown LLC folks in the building, or are you still waiting on them?
No, but their documents are filled out and there's nothing, it's just a change of manager, so they should be fine to move forward with.
Have they finished all?
Yeah, they finished their paperwork.
So there's no need for them to technically be here?
Yeah.
Then I would move approval of their request to have a change of manager at the Pie Town Restaurant.
Do we want to wait until 6:45 in case somebody from the public wants to weigh in on this?
We could,
I suppose it is a public hearing,
yeah. Good point.
so we can hold off on that for a second. Let's see, we've got some, how about we just go down through the wage authorizations? It's going to take me a second to get through my digital packet here to find them.
I have that information if you'd like me to read it in the record.
I would. That would be great.
The wage authorization included in the agenda is number 1, Jesse Warren, Administrative Assessor, $52,678. Number 2, Joshua Pease, Part-Time Police Officer, $21.50 per hour. Max Jette, Volunteer Firefighter, EMT, $18.59 an hour. Can you help me with that pronunciation?
Ostaquio?
Ostaquio.
Ostaquio. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Rodrigues, full-time police officer, $24.98 per hour. Robert Brooks, full-time police officer, $24.98 per hour. I would move approval of those individuals included in the record and presented to us on our agenda.
I would second that motion. And since it's just the two of us, I don't think we've got any discussion, so I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We-
Excellent. Still scrolling through
Here
this packet
here comes the chair.
Don't let me stop it.
Well, we're set to, we're just waiting for 6:45 for the public hearing for Pie Town. And we've done the wage authorizations and opened the meeting. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, it's all yours.
So it'd be 6:30, did
And
they hear?
Greg, we tabled the Colebrook.
That's just
Resort.
us.
Yeah.
All right. How come?
Lack of completion of forms.
Okay. So we have what, the architectural, so we started looking at the fire station?
That's next, and if the Pie Town folks were to arrive, we could just break and have a very brief discussion of that. The
Yeah.
paperwork is all complete on that. That would be an easy vote.
Mm-hmm. You've done all the wage authorizations?
Yes, we did.
And is the insurance advisory committee quick, or is that,
That should be very quick.
It's just another appointment.
are they here for that one? I mean, do we need them here for that, if we just do it?
Yep.
Yeah, you can just do it.
I just try to get some small stuff done
Sure.
and finish it off instead of get going. And the election worker appointments?
And probably resignation of the treasurer as well is
Yeah.
pretty straightforward.
Right. All right, so why don't we just deal with that? So we have the resignation letter from Alex Haggerty, the treasurer,
We do?
collector, and you're prepared to re-advertise?
Yes, I am also requesting that the board give me authorization to go forward with an interim service until we are able to fill that position full-time.
Yeah, whatever service we used last time, do you recall that worked well?
So I actually found another local service. They're out of Hardwick. And I think that this service may work better than the service that we had last time.
Why?
She just has a different approach, I think, to addressing some of the issues. And she's more of a, I just feel that she's going to be a little bit more detail oriented on addressing some of the issues that we have down there. And she, she's been working in Hardwick. She works in the Brookfield, so she's very familiar with some of the small town issues that we have.
What's the expense versus the company's last time?
So it's $80 an hour, and I think last time it was $85 an hour for the,
So comparable.
right. I mean, it is $120 an hour for her services, but she does have other employees, but that's similar to what the other company offered as well. We had kind of we didn't have the owner of the company managing.
How many hours a week we looking to bring them in?
I would say 2 days a week, so 16 hours again. That was what we had last time.
I'm comfortable with that. Dylan? I said I'm comfortable with that. Are you?
Yeah.
Maureen?
Yeah, I would move to accept the resignation of the treasurer-collector, Alex Haggerty, effective
The 29th.
the 29th of March, and authorize the administrative assistant or the town administrator to seek services from, do you know the name of the?
Mass Munifin.
Mass, what?
Munifin.
Muni, okay. To fill the vacancy created by Alex Haggerty's resignation.
I'll second that, of course. Motion to second to accept his resignation and have the interim treasurer done by Jessica. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. While we're on the topic, we can briefly talk about what we want to do for searching. I was comfortable within this position to go ahead and try to get, I'd like to see 3 to 5 resumes that we can look at and pick 3 that we want to interview and go that way and allow Jessica to advertise and get whatever resumes in she can and present us with the 5 best picks that meet the qualifications, which I assume we still have on record from, a year and a half ago?
Almost 2 years.
And keep everything else the same, unless you want to specifically read those things before we advertise.
I mean, I have no problem with having discussions regarding the resumes that may come in. I think the protocol that you've, discussed seems reasonable. And if, after looking at the top 3 or 4, we're not happy, I guess we just do it again.
Exactly, that's what we did for actually the administrator once through, and hopefully that won't be the case. But I like the board to hire the department heads themselves, and Jessica can sort of do all the legwork up to that point and bring us five resumes to look at, and we'll let her know which 3 we'll want to interview.
I would ask that Jessica, if and when appropriate, she would involve others within the finance group to take a look at and do preliminary interviews if you think that's acceptable. That would be acceptable.
If you'd like to make a committee for it, you're welcome to do so
Right.
at your own peril, and set something up that you can review it if it makes it easy for you. I'd like it to get advertised, I would assume, Maureen, as soon as possible, and hopefully, leave this out there for 3 weeks, or how do you want to leave it advertised?
We can start with 3 weeks. I think if anybody's interested in that type of position, they're gonna see it within the first 10 days and apply for it, but 3 weeks would probably be a good window to give anybody who might think about it some extra time.
Right, and we'll schedule interviews for, sometime within the 4th week. We'll try to schedule them soon after, so if we keep up with what comes in, then you'll have an idea if they're keepable or not keepable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you need 5, you're not just gonna give us a couple that are no good, we're gonna keep advertising to get qualified candidates. Well, I shouldn't say that. If we have at least 3 qualified, we can interview, but we prefer to get 5 before we start any interviews, and we can cut the 3 weeks back if you want, so we could say 2 and start interviewing the 3rd week if we have candidates qualified, and we can always re-advertise. But I don't think it's a rush if we bring the service in. That worked well last time. We're far enough out from end of year that we'll hopefully get this done.
Yeah. Well, one issue that we do have, of course, is the change in the software that we're managing, or I should say that the financial team is managing. I would suspect that it would be in our best interest to potentially consider the interim service maybe even till the end of the fiscal year, because we've got to roll over in July with a whole new set of requirements under the software. So I just
We'll
want to
keep them on as long as they need to.
Yeah.
I mean, if we pick up someone who's proficient and they hit the ground in, you know, early to mid-May, and
Yeah, I mean, but
whether or not they.
Well, I would just say, having run my life on fiscal year, as you have as well, I mean, in May, we are pushing a budget through, we are hoping to continue to certify free cash, we have, you know, we're changing the software, then we're rolling over for the new software July 1. Anybody who would be interested in this job would be sitting, taking a lot of deep breaths. We really need to make certain that the town is secure and that the financial management team feels safe and secure with the interim person.
Well,
And
I would feel more comfortable saying for right now, we're looking at advertising through April, maybe starting interviews by the end of April.
Sounds good.
So we'd be looking for a hire to start mid to 3rd week in May. So we'd at least want this, the interim to stay in through May.
The only thing I would
And
worry.
we can possibly extend to June if they will.
The only thing I worry about is if you have a really strong candidate, and they are working in mid-May, the end of May, in another town similar to ours, and they would walk out the door to help out Barre and leave their, I would worry.
Well, and that, right, and
I'm serious. I mean, I would worry about that. I would expect the person to say, I have to give a reasonable, you know, time period to cut ties with the place that they are currently working. I mean, that would be our hope and expectation for anybody we hired. And we've had enough turnaround in this position that I want to make sure that the next person we bring on board is prepared for the work that needs to be done and to kind of accept a town that's rolling over.
And the
into-
reality is, when the fiscal year ends, even the first 2 to 3 weeks of
Is
July,
tough.
There's a lot going on, transferring and catching up on
Absolutely.
payments and paying out stuff that's,
Yep,
you know, just waiting for invoices from
Exactly,
the previous
yep.
year. So it doesn't necessarily make a clean split at that point either. But I don't want to say now we definitely want to hire through June, but if you two could attain whatever you want for the motion. But I'd say definitely through May and potentially extend it, unless it makes a difference to the agency. If we need to go extend through June, then we may have
My
to.
my only concern is I don't want to rush and say if we've got, you know, 3 candidates, but we're not happy with any one of them. And then we're saying, well, you know, we really want to get the interim person out, we want to get our own person in. That is not the way in which I would like to approach it. I would like to make certain that we have the strongest possible team. And whether it's working with the interim through the end of the year, through town meeting, and bringing on someone new, you know, into July.
Or maybe even at a reduced hours at that point.
Yes,
Maybe
yeah.
not full-time, but keep them on at 1 day a week.
Because if you take a look at our audits, the last 3 years, we have significant issues of concern that need to be addressed. And so I would make the motion that we pursue a process whereby we seek highly qualified applicants to fill the position of treasurer-collector. And that Jessica be, stuck with the responsibility of putting together the outreach and also providing the internal work that needs to be done to take a look at the credentialing and references, and that she bring us 3 to 5 strong candidates for our review by May 15th.
I would like them before that.
Okay, May 1st?
I think, and this is why we're talking about advertising. If she can get the candidates in 2 weeks, then I think a 3-week deadline is plenty. If we don't have them in 3 weeks, then we can extend it. But I don't want to project that out 6 weeks, you know, and
Well, see, to me, this is an incredibly important task, and I just want to make sure that we give ourselves the time that's necessary to make sure we look carefully into the background of individuals, that we, are prepared to do the work that's necessary to get the right person.
Right, and the sooner we get those candidates in, the more time we have to look at them as well. But I think that 3 weeks is fine for now, so I would strongly recommend we keep that to 3 weeks for this initial. We can always extend it if need be, but I hate to set a lengthy guideline. Have qualified candidates, especially if you found someone who's new to the area and looking for a new job here and wants to get working and not wait 2 months and potentially lose a candidate by dragging our feet too long. So there's another side of it that becomes difficult. I would strongly recommend the 3 weeks for the candidates be presented to us, and then we can proceed when we're comfortable with the interviews, if, what we want to do for background checks. But typically, you'd interview people and not background check everybody.
I would never interview someone that I hadn't done some background on, because it's just wasting my time if that background is not what we want. I mean, because then you bring someone in, you spend time with them, they're great at the interview, and then you think you've got a candidate, and you make some efforts on a background check, and then we're just all embarrassed. So I would do some initial conversation calls to people who knew the candidate, who use them as references, and figure out that we've got some strong candidates coming in the door.
And I'm also comfortable going the other way. We interview the candidates who we're interested in and make the phone calls on our first choice first and follow up. And if that doesn't pan out, then we'll go to our second choice and follow up. But we don't announce to anyone the choices until we've done all that background. But then we may be able to just check the references in the background of the first candidate, and it limits how much time we spend in that process. But
Well,
I agree we want to do it before we make the hire, but
well,
we'll get to that.
You
For
and
now-
you and I agree to disagree on, we'll move on.
For now, let's go for the 3 weeks.
Okay.
We can put that to a vote, give it 3 weeks to come up with the candidates, is that fine?
Well, it's a good start.
Fair enough, it'll get extended for so.
Do you have that motion sort of,
I got it.
you got it?
And we're modifying it to 3 weeks initially.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. We need a
Okay, I'll second that.
I'll second.
Oh, we already got,
Second.
there we go, either. Motion is second to authorize Jessica to pursue the advertising and the gathering of 3 to 5 candidates for us, 3 weeks.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, and let us know when you get something final that we need to sign with the interim, because we'll need to get, obviously, a contract engaged before they're gonna wanna start.
Right.
Alex gave us, what, 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
He notified me 3 weeks in advance, gave a formal notice 2.5 weeks, so.
So we have some time to, we can wait till our next meeting.
Well, he's the 29th, yes, he'll be
The
gone.
29th
He'll
is-
be
It'd be
gone.
nice to get get someone to start before he's gone.
The interim, yeah.
Yeah, have a couple days to, whatever he needs to relay to them, and I would think a day or two is probably enough for pertinent things. They can ask the questions that they need to ask, and he can give the information he feels is necessary. But if we need to, we can have a meeting in between, just need to give us a heads up, we gotta do it and get a contract signed to get them started. Never the fun part, changing department heads, done it too much.
Well, I mean, he's here till next week, next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Okay, I don't expect we'll have a candidate by then, but we will have the interim people that we've discussed working and making certain that we're moving forward in a productive way.
So, just to make clear, we should authorize Jessica to sign the interim contract for up to the, as we discussed tonight, the
Yep.
$80 an hour, that was 120 for the
Yep.
crew.
Yep.
Whatever it was. Authorize her to sign that and engage that, so we don't have to try to post a meeting and have another meeting.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion,
I'll second it.
okay? You understand what I'm saying, Dylan? I want to make sure we get the interim in here before Alex is gone. And we're not gonna, it's not gonna do it if we have to meet and sign it.
Right.
Okay, so we motion a second to allow Jessica to sign for the interim. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. We are past our time. Do we have
Pie
the
Town?
folks for Pie Town? I don't see anyone yet.
They don't, it's just a change of manager. It's pretty perfunctory. They just have to fill out all the paperwork, which they did. One of the owners is selling half of her business, so they're just transferring the management over to the other owner. So
I move approval of the change of managers presented by the documents from Pie Town LLC.
I'll second that motion.
All right, so we have a motion to second to go ahead and approve the transfer of management for Pie Town. Before we vote on that, do we have any discussion or any questions from the audience? Sam?
In regards to the treasurer collector,
No, this is just for Pie Town right now, please. Any comments on the Pie Town management at this point? We don't need a public hearing on it, right?
No.
Just the approval.
Well, the Pie Town is technically a public hearing, yeah.
So it is a public hearing for it, so that's why
Yep.
that's why I wanted to make sure before we took a vote that
Yep.
everyone had a chance for input on it.
Yep.
Okay. Hearing nothing further, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the change?
Aye.
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 All right. That takes care of that side of it. And let's do the appointment, the Insurance Advisory Committee and the workers. Let's get those things done a little.
I move the approval of the Insurance Advisory Committee to have the Fire Department Union rep be John Hanson, and to recognize the retiree, Michael Landry, as also a person who will represent retirees in the Insurance Advisory Committee.
Okay.
Second.
I have motion and second for these two stated persons to be members of the advisory committee for the Insurance Advisory Committee. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then we have, of course, the election workers. This is just appointing two new election workers, I assume?
Mm-hmm.
So we have,
I move approval of Thomas Bavenzi and Jane Day as election workers.
Second?
motion is second to appoint those two as election workers. Any further discussion? Right now, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Use of town property, are they here for that, or is?
I don't believe so.
No.
They're not.
Okay, so we
Just-
can wait, we'll wait on that.
Well,
Let's get,
No, no,
Well,
no,
it's
they're
just a
not
tip-
coming tonight. They're just requesting for the Proper Community Band. They do every year, that's Coldbrook. So they want to use the town hall for the.
right, but their applications also.
Yes.
I'm saying, I'm not holding them up if I go back to.
Oh, yeah, no, no,
We have a
no.
lot of people here about the fire station
No.
issue, so I want to get into that, rather than hold anything else up. And that's the bulk of what everyone's here for, I assume, is the fire station? No, yes? What do we have people here for in the crowd, out of curiosity? Just viewing, or?
Boy Scouts.
We're here,
Boy Scouts?
we're here before the board with, looking for a charter partner.
Okay. Is
Is
that
that on
on?
the agenda?
I would suggest that we just discuss it under other new business, because we had discussed it and
I didn't
life
see it
got
there.
crazy.
That's
And I
okay.
was trying to call you back, but we were
We're
playing a little
good.
bit of phone
We're good
tag.
if you've got time.
But I would say under other new business.
How detailed are we gonna get? Should this have been posted, or is this gonna be something?
We're just,
I
we're
think
looking to join in a
fair.
charter partner, but I don't.
Yeah, no, I think
The
it would be
discussion will also
appropriate.
be on your end. We're here to answer.
I think it's fair for the board to start to have a discussion today. I mean, the board doesn't have to make any decisions tonight.
Certainly. Then why don't you come on up and join us and let us know what you have. I'm trying to get everyone out of here that wants to get out of here before we get into what I expect will be a lengthy portion of the meeting.
So are you going to go back to the questions coming?
Yeah, we'll do that in the end. 'cause we- you know,
Yeah,
I'll-
that's just an
yeah.
automatic, that's just every
Yeah,
year.
they're in the end, so that's easy to do. Yeah, sorry. That's, I'm trying not to jump, that's why I kind of stopped there. I wanted to get this quick things, but that's, grab a seat. I want to get these quick things out of the way.
We're here before the board tonight to enter into a.
And you are?
I am Brenda Rich, I was going to get to that.
Thank you.
Tom King.
Brenda
Tom
Rich,
King.
Tom King.
Thank you.
So we are here before the board tonight to enter into a discussion to form a new scout troop for the local youth of the Barre community. And we're looking to have a charter partner with Barre Fire Department and Boy Scouts of America. So we're here tonight to answer any questions you may have. I'm here with former chairman Ron Rich, Troop Secretary Heather Robertson, Advancement Chair Tom King, and myself, Treasurer Brenda Rich. And also with us tonight, we've got council support, Scott Carignan, that's our unit commissioner from neighboring Hubbardston, who is also a former scout.
Excellent.
Yes,
I pretty much know what's going on. I've been talking with people about it. Do you have any questions, concerns, or what do you want for an update, or?
Well, I don't, so basically, what happened to the other troop? I mean, is it,
Disbanded by Boy Scouts.
is disbanded by
It
Boy
was-
Scouts?
it was-
Okay,
it was
I'm
disbanded
good with that.
because of, failure to communicate.
Okay, so, so when you call it a charter partner, that would be what the fire department will be?
So,
Yes.
yes, we may be looking for a charter partner, whether it be a religious organization, a civic organization,
Okay.
something like that, so.
There's
Um,
currently 1,180 fire departments that do sponsor.
A lot of them are into that,
Yes,
okay.
so we have a list with us here, Ron has it, if anybody would like to view it.
We have a few Eagle Scouts in the fire department.
And you
And-
have a lot of Eagle
exactly.
Scouts in the fire
Scouts,
department.
Exactly, so we thought it might, can I have this?
And there's a lot of merit badges and stuff in the program that relate to the fire department. So I
Yes.
think it's a good fit for both. And on top of community service, I know my organization actually does painting of fire hydrants and stuff, so you get rid of all the labor in fire hydrants.
I wasn't sure if you go department or association, one way or the other on it.
So does this require a select board vote?
I don't
Well,
think so, I'm not
Scott,
sure.
can you answer
I don't
that?
think so.
I think we were,
Someone will need to sign the charter, that's really what we're looking for, is a signature, so.
Interesting.
Jessica, do you have we have a copy of the application I submitted a few weeks ago. I know council, if we get approval tonight, council has already signed the application, because they are very excited.
They've already agreed to
It
it.
is.
Right, I just want to make sure it's signed by the right
Me too.
board. The fire chief is a strong chief, and he has full control over every year, the fire department, the personnel, his equipment,
It usually
and
is
his
the head
budget.
of the organization.
Yeah,
so
it's,
typically the fire
it's
chief.
really not up to us to sign something on behalf, I think, of the fire department. I think that is
Okay,
the
now,
fire department's
for example,
ability.
this fire chief, however, is still employed by the town, if strong chief or not. I just want to make sure he's protected.
Yes, I think that's why we're here.
Yeah,
Jessica
BSA,
does that.
BSA has their own insurance, they have their own liability
Okay.
insurance, and they have their own insurance on their own scouts. So BSA picks up the insurance on the scouts. and
Okay.
Whenever there's an accident, the parents' insurance will kick in first, and anything that does not get paid.
The only concern I would have, and Chief, you may not have this concern, but if, for example, there is something that happens within the troop, okay? Does that liability go back to the chief personally?
No,
No.
Okay. Does that liability come back to the town as he being our employee?
no.
Okay. And you
What-
know that because,
If there, the only situation would be if there was a discrepancy in
funds?
anything that happens,
Oh.
it would be somebody in the wrong. So
Okay.
if there was somebody doing something in the wrong that was known, and something wasn't acted
yeah,
upon.
well, you know and I know that the Boy Scouts, along with the Catholic Church, have a
Yeah.
whole set of problems, okay, for people who kind of look the other way, you know, over the course of history, which is very sad.
And most
And
of
we
that was
will-
in the 60s and
Yeah.
70s, and there's a lot of policies and procedures now that
Oh,
are
okay.
taking place.
I just want to
We
make
don't
sure that
have
the
to go-
chief is protected as
Yes.
someone who is taking this responsibility, which is above and beyond his job. I just want to make sure that the community, the town, has an obligation to protect him and to ensure that the liability insurance that the town has would be shared with him if necessary. And I just want to make sure that that's the case.
Well, we certainly,
Jessica, do you have a copy of the insurance paperwork?
It's in my office.
Okay, we
Yeah.
submitted a copy of the BSA.
We do have to take youth protection training every single year.
Okay.
It's only offered by,
I do-
it's only required.
Having
by
been
Boy
a
Scouts
school
every 2
person, you
years.
know, I know that this can be a problem.
And
So,
we would like to say, and I know the other troop was disbanded, it was very bittersweet, but those are the reasons it was disbanded. We as a troop committee were holding up BSA policy, and we were getting a lot of resistance and lack of cooperation. We called in council, so we are very excited about this if it can move forward. Chief's concern is he wanted the board's blessing.
is there any obligation by the fire department, by the chief, that he has to uphold to do for his portion
So
of
the way
this?
it will work is the charter, like the Congregational Church was our charter. So at the top of the organization sits the institution head, who was always the minister. The past one would have been SUNY Nikki in absence of them having a minister at that time. So then under that follows the institution head, then you have the charter organization representative. Under that comes the committee chair, does all the hiring, the firing of all the individuals who are in the unit. They are basically responsible for selecting
Good leadership.
good leadership. I was looking for the word, superior leadership that follows BSA policy. we are sticklers. I think Mr. Carignan will agree for following policy to its best to ensure there is no issues down the road that does cause any liability
Right,
to
no more
the town.
specific on what sort of obligations is Chief Rogowski signing on for?
Chief Rogowski
if
is gonna
anything,
sit at the
with
top
this?
as probably the institution head. We will work under him, and we'd like to come in as our committee. We, right now, have, he basically does, he would just, what do I wanna say, he sits at the top as the head.
He's a figurehead.
He's a figurehead.
Okay.
He's gonna be a figurehead.
That is a rep that goes back and forth between, so if there is any issues, that rep would go to him.
The charter rep would go
Clear.
between
And I assume offer use of the
I think
building
figurehead is a
convenience.
very wrong thing to call someone who's going to take this obligation and responsibility
He's
on.
the institution.
If I could just add a little bit, so he assures that the adult leadership that's selected is appropriate for
Okay.
the
There we
unit.
go.
Okay.
If he feels for any reason that someone coming in, even though they filled the application, they get the query done, they get the SORI done, they do all the youth protection, if you feel that, you know, that's not the right person for the
He makes
organization, they're gone. He can also make the decision to remove somebody.
Okay, sounds to me like a dictator, so that's much better.
Yes.
Well, what I also like, is
So-
given it's
so
working
we-
with children, is that everyone that is a firefighter has to pass a
Yeah.
core check, and they always are when they're not a
Yes.
firefighter. So at least, you know, within that building, the people that are there working there, we know that they are.
Well, I would suspect you have a
Safe
Corey
people
and a
to do it.
Sori.
We have a coordinatory,
Yeah.
and we as a council, when I sat on the executive board years back, we put in the stipulation of doing youth protection training every year versus every 2 years, which is
Excellent.
national, to close the gap on anybody that may fall through.
Yeah.
So, again, I think our group is very, very firm with anybody who doesn't follow any of those policies, which would let us do this
Yeah,
to
well-
the end of.
Well, I would just say to the chief, you know how, I know how busy you already are.
Yeah,
The fact that you take on this additional and very important responsibility, I thank you as a community member. And I hope if at any time you feel that this is a burden beyond something that's reasonable in the position that you have, that you come forward and ask us to help you excise yourself from this and to find another person within the organization to do the job, because he's a very busy guy.
yeah, and we
um,
appreciate that.
There's
We
still
have-
some conversation I need to have with Brenda regarding this, but I wanted to make sure it was all right.
Okay.
The legalities of the town, I
Yeah.
didn't know how it worked.
So basically, we will run the unit, he again will sit as a figurehead with the charter organization.
Hardly a figurehead if he has the
And
responsibilities and
we're not
authority to
asking-
do what you've said.
We're not asking to add to his workload, but, you know, right off the bat, he said, can I have a pancake breakfast? We're like, yeah. So the treasurer would oversee any fundraising in the unit, so we would do all the legwork as a committee, then we have troop leadership who would work with the boys. This is
I commend all of you for working hard
Thank
to recreate an organization that's very valuable to our children. And I thank you for that, all of you, for participating in that.
It's been
And
a long road, but we're excited for a new challenge if you're
Okay.
allowing us to move forward.
if you're excited, I'm excited.
As am I, and I would give this opportunity for anyone in the public that has comments or questions or concerns. Feel free to, yes, Dennis?
I really wish this was on the agenda so other people could have known about it to be here. There's a lot of unanswered questions here that I have. I'm not here, I knew nothing about this.
Mhm.
That's not why I'm here, I'm here for the fire department.
Right.
Um,
Well, as Jessica said, we went forward with the hearing because it's really just, he doesn't need our permission for it. We
No, I understand
We
that.
appreciate that he's asked for it. It does kind of shed a little light on it, like, to what's going on, and
And I did meet with Jessica, and I don't know why we're not on the agenda, but that was my concern today. When I did call everybody, I was gonna try to pinpoint, but not pointing any fingers. We were happy to come. We figured we better be here in case.
let's try this. What about, I mean, I would move we give him our blessing tonight anyways, but maybe we
I would.
have a public hearing in a couple of weeks and let you come back and let people come and have any questions they have in a couple of weeks. And if you come back for a public hearing in a couple of weeks, just to
I would-
let people.
Can we keep those questions to the new unit moving forward and not to the
Yeah,
past
can
unit
we
that's been
just, yes.
Not just what?
just to the new unit going forward and not to the past unit that's.
Well, yeah, that would be the
been
idea, would be to
This
find
is
any
not-
questions or
This is not
concerns.
about the past unit.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I can't hear what you said.
We would have a hearing in 2 weeks, so people could ask questions of how they're forming what they're
No,
doing.
that's what he said.
Right, for the new unit. It's
Is
not
there any-
about the old unit or why it's been disbanded, it's about how we're moving forward and what the intention is of this.
Yeah. Is there anything we can answer for you here tonight, Dennis? or-
Yeah, what troop number is this gonna be?
Well, our new troop unit number we are looking to use would be Troop 122 Barre. Troop 26 Barre has been disbanded by
And they will
the
not allow
scout
us to go along
executive
with it.
from Heart of New England Council. It will never come into play again. It has been dissolved.
One thing I would like to say that this would not be a hearing, as we have
I
no,
know.
this would be an informational session, potentially, because a hearing
Correct,
has all
not
kinds
a
of...
public hearing, just a public comment period with, you know, a question, a Q&A for the public would be good. Does that sound better? Just a Q&A for the public if people have any questions, and give them a chance to
I don't have
ask them.
any real issues with that, but I have a group of very busy men here, and I think it's gonna fall on them. Whether Tom is driven from Blackstone, Mass tonight
Yep.
to be here. and-
Well, it's up to you if you'd like to come back and field questions from people about just anything about the new unit and how it's gonna work, we do that.
If you want to do that.
If that's what you're requiring, us, we'd be happy to do it.
It's
I'm
not
sure
required,
that
it's
needed.
not required. It is
I'm
not
not sure
required,
it's
I'm just
needed.
offering it up as a chance, because I would have liked to have seen it on the agenda and given people some notice, and it's just not, and I, you know, I don't ever try to hide discussions from the public or
Well,
cut
I
people
hope that
out.
you're not thinking that that's on our behalf, because it's
No,
not.
not at all, but, you know, I fully support this, we've been talking about this for several weeks, and I'm happy to see it's got to this point. And I would make a motion, this board give our consent for Chief Rogowski to pursue this how he sees fit.
If that's a requirement, is it a requirement that the board do that?
I think that's why he's here, is because he wants to have our consent.
We had talked early on, we've been in discussion for maybe a month, I don't mean to speak for him, but he
I-
wanted to be sure that everything was.
I would say that
kosher.
I would prefer the motion to read that we would support the chief as he takes on this new obligation and responsibility. And not only thank him in advance for that, but we, you know, provide you with assistance if that's necessary or helpful.
Yeah, I'm just, just with our blessing, just so
Yeah.
it's very clear that this is
Yes.
done with our blessing. You know, our good wishes as well.
Yeah.
Dylan, anything else? Any questions, additions?
We're not voting on this tonight because it's not on the agenda, correct?
We are. We're just making a motion to give, you know, our support to the chief in his endeavors and our blessing and
So is this, the next meeting would be in 2 weeks' time, is that when it is?
Yes.
so I was gonna do a vote on it just to show that we, you know, are giving our support to the chief in his endeavor here.
And it would also maybe allow us to have the scout executive, Mark, with us, and also Bill Dunbar, the district executive, who could, I mean, the questions are pretty simple, I think, that would be answered.
Right.
I mean, we're full transparency, we have nothing to hide, we want to, the other troop was 98 years old out of 112 years old, we have significant history here, we would love, we didn't want this to happen, but it wasn't our decision,
Mhm.
and we are ready to move forward. People are waiting, we need to do a huge recruitment, and we need to get the ball rolling if we're gonna go forward.
Right.
Do you feel that there's any reason that this would not go forward?
No, not at all. That's why I'm trying to say, go ahead and give our blessing to the chief, and I wanted to put that to a vote, so Maureen has made the motion, I will second it. And I will call for a vote for showing our support, as Dr. Marshall stated. All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good luck. And
So we'll
if
see
you-
you in 2 weeks, and we'll bring whomever we can bring with us if they're available.
am I right in 2 weeks, or we are 3 weeks out?
No,
we're
it's
2
2
weeks.
weeks.
Or is 2, right, with the timing?
April 4th.
Okay,
Okay,
making
well, thank you
sure.
very much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Sorry about
I'll call you tomorrow.
that. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I just want to make sure to get
yes, oh, okay, so now we're just...
very clear that we're supporting this. I don't want to leave anything
Now,
unanswered.
now we're doing
for the,
fire stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's
I don't want to leave any,
Yeah.
you know, the committee thinking that we're not supporting it in some way, you know.
Right.
That's what I was.
All right. This, architecture fire station presentation. We are ready for that.
All right.
Great.
Just gonna rotate our other
Okay.
board member who's right
Fantastic.
here.
So my name is Ted Galante. I've been working, our firm has been working on this project for a bit, and we're here to give an update and set of recommendations, and talk through all the components of all the pieces that we've been looking at and working with the chief, with Jessica.
I'm going to interrupt for 1 second
Yes.
before we go further. One of the site considerations was to be kept out of the public. Are we going to not discuss that at this point because it's not our first choice?
No, everything that's in his presentation we can still discuss, but
I do.
for the town to go forward with purchasing any land, just that type of conversation has to be kept private, so.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry about that. Go,
That's okay.
please continue.
I was actually just gonna say, interrupt me at will, because I talk a lot and I talk fast, but if I misstate something or it's not clear, please jump in. So, the feasibility study was to look at a number of different sites and assess the existing building, as well as look at a number of different sites and talk about the possibilities on those sites. The 4 sites that were studied are Mechanic Street, Broad Street, South Street, and Wheelwright Road, and there have been a couple of studies on each one, and so we're going to talk about the main studies. Everyone is fairly familiar with where the sites are. The headquarters is at the top of the slide here. Broad Street site is just nearby, and the Mechanic Street site is just nearby. South Street is a little further south, and then Wheelwright Road is all the way at the bottom of the slide. There's some zoning criteria. None of it really has any significant bearing on putting a fire station at one of these locations. There is one deed restriction on the Mechanic Street site on the park, and so Mechanic Street is the upper left-hand side of the site, and that sort of shortened hockey stick that's colored in red is the site that's being considered, that under the word street is a park that is by deed restricted. Broad Street is the next to the top right with the existing building on it across from the common. South Street is the lower left where the police department is, and Wheelwright Road is where our current substation is on the bottom right. Of the sites, there are really 2 that seem to stand out and are kind of the strongest. Mechanic Street it's between Mechanic and School Street, just to be clear. But Mechanic Street seemed to be the strongest because of the pros that are listed there. Located near the town center, it's town-owned property, keeps the headquarters in the neighborhood, and it's very similar response as current headquarters. When we talk about response time, it's about how fast the department gets to an incident. Multiple points of access for responding emergency personnel, so people can get there from a few different streets. Adequate parking on site, and multiple building options possible. I'll show you one, but there are a few others that we've looked at. The cons, really, it's currently the town's municipal lot, and so that has impact on town operations if that were taken over for a fire.
Well, I would comment on that too, which no one's really considered. If this is done, we have just 200 feet down the street, the fire station, which would open up parking,
Not very convenient parking, but
Well,
parking.
it's another 200-foot walk from, when that space fills up during snowstorms normally is where it really fills up. I think the cars that parked on a nightly basis could park in the fire department parking lot without any issue, but for people just trying to get out of the way for storms, if they walk another 200 feet, at least it's still available.
And if that building goes away, then that opens up.
Even more so if
That's
the
right.
building,
That's right.
we'll get to that later.
So the Broad Street site on the corner of Broad and School, again, the pros, it's located near the town center. Really an opportunity with that from a building design perspective to put some civic structure that's very proudly facing the common could be quite gorgeous. Fast response time, similar enough local to the existing headquarters. Adequate parking on site, and we have some diagrams to show you that. There's additional municipal parking nearby if the lot were to stay at Mechanic Street. And again, multiple points of access for responding personnel, which is important. One of the larger cons is that the property is not town-owned, and so there's an expense of acquiring the property, and that's something that would need to be considered. The building on site does need to be removed. And the use of the building throughout history, there may be some environmental concerns which would have to be part of the analysis, right? Mm-hmm. So those are some of the cons to think about. So from a location perspective, it's strong. There are some cautionary pieces that we have to think through. The South Street site, which is down by the school and the police station, the pros is that maybe there's one public safety complex on site. There is some room for future expansion. There might be adequate parking, but it's a very challenging site. The fact that it's 30 feet below grade, below School Street, makes it in excess of NFPA standards for access for emergency vehicles like that. It would be a very expensive site to develop if we were to do that because of the length and depth of retaining walls that would be necessary around the entire property, it seems. Building location is limited, and the response time is drastically affected by how far it is from the center of town, but more so the amount of high school traffic at 7 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. on South Street, it sounds like it would have a significant impact on getting to a call if need be. So that site has limits. Wheelwright Road is an existing building with the fire department, and this site, it already houses a fire station. That building would be redeveloped, but it has a significant number of cons, being far away from the town center, really no possibility of future expansion. When we think about designing a fire station or a public safety building, we're always looking at 50 to 75 years, right? What is the potential growth and what is the potential expansion for a building? And so, that's this site is limited in that way. Zoning variance is required because it's a little bit tighter, the buildable area, and it's a pretty high investment for a reduced size building. Doesn't really fit the required program. Program meaning what does the fire department need, and requires keeping the existing headquarters in service. And so now we have two buildings, and the existing headquarters will always need renovation, right? Whatever happens with that building, it'll always need renovation. So Mechanic Street is recommended. If we dive a little bit deeper, this is existing conditions. It's a relatively flat site used as parking. And we've developed three different buildings. I'm going to just show you one quickly. It's not really buildings, they're diagrams of a potential building. And so the building here faces School Street, and I'm going to move around, sorry. These are 5 apparatus bays on the apron, that's called. And the trucks would deploy out that direction onto School Street, and then there's parking, 20 spaces just to the right of the building and 18 spaces in the back of the building. So access could be had from either side. And when we talk about public safety facilities, we like to keep any kind of visiting access separate from the emergency vehicles leaving. So if someone's coming for a burn permit or to talk to someone and there's some emergency happening, the traffic is separate. And so that's why there's a little green buffer between the 20 parking spaces and the other. Firefighters could park in the 20 spaces, firefighters could park in the 18 spaces, and then access the building in a couple of different ways. We don't really know what the building looks like. There's just a little protrusion out this way for access. This is a graphic for handicap parking, so there's a couple of handicap spots, so somebody can get in there and access the building. Block diagrams are really just ideas of rooms without really corridors or doors or anything. They're saying this is about the size of the things that we need, and so this is sort of a furniture layout in a block diagram. And so this idea makes the entire first floor accessible, and there's not a need for an elevator in this proposal because the first floor is accessible, and then able-bodied firefighters will be using the upper floors, and so there's no need for that. And so that's why we like to put the training room or community room, as it could be used for, on this level. And so in theory, one could come in a door here. There's, maybe we'd like to put a restroom nearby and some sort of blood pressure check room, and then a corridor down into a training room with other accessories along the way, offices and things. All of this space is really just to support the fire department. There's a couple of pull holes. There's washing machines for the firefighters' turnout gear, storage of turnout gear, things like that, and then 2 means of egress from the floor above. So they're really simple. This is not a design. This is just sort of putting all the pieces in place to say this is what's needed. And of course, the big area I talked about is the Apparatus Bay. There are five bays, which is what we worked out with the chief. The upper floor, and so that floor is roughly 11,500 square feet. The upper floor block diagram is all the residential living within a fire department, right? And so there is There are bunk rooms along the back. There's some future expansion for bunk rooms. There's locker rooms, restrooms, meeting rooms, a fitness area, which would be nice to have, kitchen, an eating area, which is really important for team building in fire departments, a day room, and those things are either joined or separate, and then a conference room, if I said that, a reports room, so we can write a report professionally and efficiently, and it's all put together. And so that floor is roughly 9,000 square feet. So we're talking about buildings that are 20,000 square feet in general.
Little cheap on the female restroom and lockers, I'd say.
Yes, and so
Just saying.
that's a department discussion. No, it's a great point, and it's a department discussion. We are always trying to figure out how many female firefighters there are or will be versus how many male there are or will be. The one thing that we do is we make the individual restrooms, when we put them in, gender neutral, and anyone can use those restrooms. So that's always something that we're planning. And in this case, we're showing double bunk rooms. We can make them single bunk rooms, and so they're gender equality, and that's a very big push. There's a lot of reasons that Barre needs a new fire station.
Oh, God, yes.
And we can talk about that if we want.
Yes.
Gender neutrality is one of those reasons. There's many others. These are a quick, just massing. Possible massing means the building is about this big. We don't know what it looks like in shape, in color, or material. We're just saying that here are buildings around the area, right? That's the Broad Street building right there. Here are buildings around the area. These are 5 overhead door bays, apparatus door bays. That's the parking area, and one would enter that side, and this would be the parking on the rear of the building, and that little hole in the building is maybe an outdoor terrace, so that when firefighters make dinner, they can sit outside and eat outside, because it's really their second home. So this is just, and there's possible expansion to the building this way. There's really not much expansion this way. We did do a scheme on this site where we took over the park, and there was the possibility of future expansion that way, but that would require a change to a deed that at the moment we respect and is not shifting. So red massing because it's a fire station and the houses are white, and that's sort of the scale and size of the building as we go around. So pros of this, again, we talked about the pros and cons of the site, and this is just sort of a repeat of that. But it fits everything that's needed and would work very well for the town, we believe. So that site was recommended, and now this is Broad Street, which is also recommended, but recommended in orange with just a little bit of caution, right? There's some things that we're not sure about. Broad Street and School Street, the existing building with parking, and we know that there's some topography, that this part of the building part of the site drops down significantly. This part is a little flatter over here, and so there's a couple of ways that we can approach that building if we were to consider building there. We have something called the first floor training room because it makes the ADA accessibility easier. There is a second floor training room which then would require an elevator, though it does open up more room for parking because then we could park underneath. And so is that something that, from a massing perspective, we were thinking through? Same sort of idea. We have a roughly a 20,000 square foot building that is 2 stories here, 1 story here, parking off of School Street and parking off of Broad Street. This would be firefighter parking only because the emergency vehicles would deploy this way. We could pull this out further. We just felt it made a deeper off-road path. So we could modify that a little bit, but the entrance to the building would be off to the right side on that lower 1-story mass.
It looks like less parking overall.
It is. That's exactly the case. Excuse me, exactly the case. This footprint is roughly 13,000 square feet, and if we do the block diagram sort of furniture plan, the training room is off to the right-hand side. It's a little bit bigger of a training room, and so if there are other towns that wanted to train with this department, that could happen. That training room could be rented at times for other departments. There's a number of different ways that can work. There's an entrance in the front of the building here, offices, dispatch. If I need to go to the training room, I can go there. I have restrooms directly off of there. Tables and chairs fold up, they go into storage. We have, ideas of electrical, mechanical, automatic transfer switch, generator kind of things. And then all of this from here over is support for the 5 apparatus bays that face face the street. On the second floor, same idea. The bunk rooms are bunk rooms are in the back of the building along here. This is all single story now, could expand in future to 2 stories. This is all living quarters throughout here, and then single story in this area, though a higher story because it's the Apparatus Bay, but all of this could expand out that way in future as well. So there is the possibility of a larger building, should it ever be needed 50 years from now, on that site. So existing building on the site, we really don't have the topography shown here. We have to kind of visualize that because it's a Google Earth image that we're now putting models on. But that kind of massing, and you can imagine that if this red rectangle were lifted up and at that level, parking could be underneath it, which would maximize the parking on site and make it closer and equal to Mechanic Street. Has other implications, I think. And then if we existing again from the common, if we're in the common, there's a fire station facing the common. Again, could be quite a handsome building for that area. Again, a lot of pros and not so many cons. And you know that the building ownership and such is South Street was looked at but not recommended. It is, the existing conditions are here. Again, a number of buildings are studied there. This is the first floor training room, very similar to the one that we just looked at on Broad Street. And the idea is to modify the site a little bit, expand the parking over here, have parking on that side, have the apparatus bays here, which take up a significant amount of space, and come up that way. And it'll be a very, very difficult way to travel up and around. We looked at putting the building here and having them travel that way. It just gets really complicated throughout and quite costly site development given the length and size of it. This originally was understood and considered to be a public safety facility housing fire and police, but the way the site was developed, that doesn't really allow that to happen so much anymore. Again, a 20,000 square foot building, very similar to what we were just showing on Broad Street, same concept on the second floor. Kind of looks like that. Here we started to illustrate topography, but it's really a steep site that drops down. And the building, if it's located over here, the massing is going to really dwarf the police station, which is really down in the hole on that side. And so it would be a significant change in what's there. And so Wheelwright Road was the last site that we were looking at. And this was a way of trying to figure out what we can fit on this, and we said 3 bays in this case, as opposed to what's needed are 5. But one thing that initially became clear is that the setback line is this dashed line, and the setback line by zoning is the allowable buildable area that you can build within. And so we were expanding larger than that already, so a variance would be required, which is probably doable, but that's one piece. There's some parking on the right, but not very much, and then the apparatus bays are in the front with the apron in the front. This is roughly an 8,000 square foot footprint, and as you can see, it's now 3 bays as opposed to 5. Maybe there's an entrance on the side. It's not really for the public in any way. We could have, this would be firefighter entrance. This would be the entrance for the people to go to the office, to offices if need be. Some offices would be here. Some people would be at headquarters. There'd be 2 buildings, and then up on the upper floor, roughly 6,500 square feet. And if we did training there, we would have a training room. We would need an elevator. If we didn't, we can make the massing a little bit smaller up there. But really having an adequate training room seemed necessary. So, of the 4 sites, we thought that Mechanic Street was the strongest candidate. There are more pros on the green blocks than there are cons. The one green block. Broad Street was the second strongest candidate with the green blocks, and then South Street and Wheelwright Road were not recommended.
One thing you didn't include in your concerns about Broad Street, at least in writing, was the fact that your concern about the fact that it was a gas station.
Yes.
And also a place where cars and so forth have been, parked and worked on for years. So I assume you're worried about contaminated earth under the building.
Yes.
Obviously, that would be a concern that we'd have to address via borings and so forth,
Yes.
would you say?
Yes, there were underground storage tanks, anything that was put into the ground, In the 1970s, Popular Mechanics magazine has illustrations of, to get rid of your the car oil, the oil that you take out of your car, dig a hole in the ground, fill it with gravel, and pour all the oil in. And so every gas station was doing that, right, for years. And so that is, in the early site statements, I think we say environmental concerns,
Okay.
and that's what we mean by that, is that
And that,
underground
and
storage.
those could be markedly prohibitive.
Yes.
The only thing that's sad to me, okay, is that if there are those concerns, we should fix it. And the only way we might get some grant money to fix it is if we put the fire station there.
That may be a strategy to pursue. It would take a little longer, but it may be a strategy to pursue.
Well, I just worry about the fact that if that ground is maybe in the condition that some of us fear, that finding a way to remedy that would be great, and maybe, and I don't know what federal grants are around this infrastructure money floating around for such things as these fire department buildings, but I didn't know if you had any indication of what we would see as far as, money for fire stations and so forth. Is that something that's on the list? It's on the list, but how close to the top of the list is it?
The funding, fire stations are essential facilities,
Right.
right? And the fact that they have life support systems, ambulance, there's money for COVID development within that. So that raises them
Okay.
to the top of the list a little bit. We're looking at other departments where really they need to run more ambulances out of their department, and so we're considering proposing the building being just an EMS station so that they can gather some of that federal money for the, so there are strategies to pursue those things.
Okay.
But I heard two questions in what you said. There are also funds for brownfield
Cleanup.
redevelopment and
Yeah.
cleanup. And so I think that's another avenue to pursue, and something that, we can look at and figure out a strategy to once we get a little deeper. I don't think it needs to be assumed that it's
Right.
contaminated. I think that's part of if the town were to pursue that property, due diligence would be to test it. And
Yeah.
that's sort of the,
Well, I mean, if we test it and find that it has significant issues of concern and it's in the center of our community,
yes.
I mean, I would say probably it would be, important to us to consider cleaning it up.
There's really two parts to the environmental component. One is anything from the ground in, and the other one is building media. Anything the building has been made of, right?
Yeah.
So from the ground up. And there may be lead paint, likely. That's a common one. But asbestos, PCBs, all sorts of things that we don't
Right.
know. And so that's part of the due diligence analysis that would have to happen.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's, yeah, there's a lot of materials out there that.
Oh, yeah,
building
for sure.
it, but, so the budget,
Dennis,
I raised my
Oh,
hand
I'm
several
sorry. Go ahead.
times. I'd appreciate if the board would recognize me as a member of this committee. Thank you. Several years ago, late 80s, early 90s, the EPA went around to the town of Barre as one of them, and all the, what they used to call the one-pumpers, gas stations in this town. They went around and dug up the whole site, pulled the old tanks out. I don't know where all the materials went, that went somewhere to be cleaned and reclaimed or whatever. That site had theirs done. As far as boring or anything else with that whole parking lot, one thing good about that site, the parking lot, looking at it to the left, was a church for a long time.
Yep.
I believe Beards, I don't know if Beards was in business when that church was still there. You may know, I don't.
I do know, when the church was there, Beards was there,
It was.
yes.
Because I know the building was there for other things
Yeah.
before Beards. But that whole ground site was dug up where the tanks used to be. As far as, and you're right, a lot of times they used to dig and just pour the oil in the ground, shamefully. If that went on that site, who knows? But they did remove the tanks out of there. I saw it. Thank you.
That's great, that's good to know. And having, you know, the EPA standards have, of course, changed and are more stringent now, and so that's something that should be considered. If there was a church on site, there's another underground consideration known as urban fill. Oftentimes, when buildings were taken down, the ground was opened and the building was pushed in, and now we have bricks and church pews and whatever else in the ground that are not helpful. And so that's something that would also have to be part of a site analysis.
I would bet that the Historical Commission, who knows everything about all this stuff, could give us some real insight into that when it was appropriate, or if it is appropriate to have that conversation.
As an aside, we're doing a project right now, and there's a hospital in Cambridge that used to be a hospital for the incurables.
Oof.
And the building next door, the businessman started an embalming fluid company. Smart business. And so that site has a lot of contamination, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So I think that you know, every site sort of has those things as well. But that's something to consider with Broad Street.
Well, there also was the old middle school was burned down, but I would suspect they probably hauled that away because it was burned on site and pretty much gone.
That's on the School Street, Mechanic Street lot.
On that lot?
Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be a school that
Yeah.
burned down
Yeah.
in 1966.
Wood frame?
Wood frame built during the Civil War.
So they may be foundations. That's another
Yes.
thing geotechnically.
I would suspect that the ledge in that area is troubling, but, I mean, no matter where you put, I
Yes,
mean, you know,
Yeah.
they're at the right
They
ratio.
have a boiler in the basement, they just bury it.
My guess,
Although back then, I think they used coal.
So, budget. The budget is built on a number of metrics that we use. Administration is really the costs that are involved in administering a project like this, like an owner's project manager is really the lion's share of that cost. Advertising for the project, and this would be a project budget, right? So administrative costs are all of those things. Architecture and engineering are our teams doing all the design and overseeing the construction. Testing and commissioning, so seeing what the rebar is doing when it gets installed, checking the welds, checking the concrete. Construction costs are the largest number. That's this number here, and it's 14 million for the Broad Street site and 13 million for the Mechanic Street site, and those are based on $650 a square foot construction costs, which are costs that are real numbers. In October of '21, we bid a project in Massachusetts, and it was about $610 a square foot. In May, I might have the dates a little bit wrong in my head because I don't remember exactly, but another project was just bid, and we were about $630 a square foot. So we're projecting $650 a square foot. It depends on when this happens, right? Its construction costs are obviously tied to fuel prices, to a potential war, to all kinds of things that have impact on, the pandemic radically changed material prices, as we know. But these numbers we feel are good numbers now for the next year perhaps, but we think they're going to go up to $700 a square foot pretty quickly. Site development, taking down a building and redeveloping the site is the next line. Broad Street's obviously more than the Mechanic Street site. These do not include hazardous material because we don't know what those might be. The training facility is not priced here because this department is not looking for that. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment, buying all the pieces and parts that need to go in the building, roughly $400,000, and then a contingency of basically about $700,000 in either one. So we're in the 16.5 to 17.5 range for the project costs to develop those two properties. But note that the Broad Street site does not include acquisition because we don't know anything about that. Right? I don't know if anybody knows anything about that yet. Maybe I'm sure you guys do. But so that's where the numbers are heading. And Construction costs are anywhere from 5 to 8% escalation year over year. And so if we start to push it out to 2023, 2024, that's where the numbers seem to be trending. Again, I wish I could project exactly where they're going to be in 2024, but too many variables.
So financing, for example, we would consider, how many fire stations have you built that had access to federal and state funds?
Many of them do. Many of
Many,
them
like
have
80%, 50%?
grants. Probably in the 50%.
50%,
range,
50%
yeah.
usually end
Yeah.
up with,
Yeah.
okay, does it matter
But
how
also
poor the
depends on-
community is, or is it just who do you know?
No, the community helps.
Okay.
The low mod income helps, community development helps.
Okay,
In Chelsea, we
Yeah.
wrote a grant for them, and they got 1.7 million, and we renovated the station with that money. That's all they had. And they didn't have it when we got hired. It just that's how it came
Okay.
together.
do you know what the, we can obviously borrow for at least 30 years, potentially 40.
Yes, yes.
I was just Googling some of the construction costs traced by the United States for different areas, and it looks like facilities like this, they claim the average cost is under $400 a square foot, so I'm just curious why it's so much higher. Obviously, when we're talking about Massachusetts, if you're in Boston or Worcester or Springfield, that
Yeah.
would severely increase your prices over here. But to me, the 16 million seems like a very high number for this part of the state.
I wish that were the case. I agree with you. I would love it to be there. In Northbridge, a little further east, where we just sent out the documents to bid, they're out to bid these few weeks, and that's, our cost estimators are both plugging $630 a square foot. And plug both, meaning there are two companies estimating it independently, and then they come together and reconcile those cost estimates. And maybe this one has electrical higher and this one has mechanical higher, but they.
Are they driven this high just because they're public and they have to go out to prevailing wages?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
Because
That's
obviously,
a big part of it.
I think the construction costs I'm looking at here are more average, and, they go as low as $230 a square foot for regular commercial buildings, privately built.
That's a really nice number. That's
Well, and this is where I have something I've thought I've had in my head, and I throw it out there publicly, and I don't know if this makes sense, but it seems to be like when post offices get built, they contract with someone to build a building or the structure, and they rent it for so many years. You can buy it at the end of the lease or whatever. I wonder if it's possible, specifically, this would only consider one site here that is not town-owned. If we contracted to purchase a building from somebody to these certain standards, how much
If you were making an effort.
how much it could be constructed for, and then if you could
I-
buy it once it's
I hear you.
constructed and save,
We-
$5 million.
We tried to do that on that central office building.
Yeah.
When it was time. Anything that you do to circumvent prevailing wage, you will find yourself in court describing to someone, what do you mean you went and had this carpenter that you knew build this building and then you bought it off of him?
It's a great idea.
Yet the Fed does it for post offices
Yeah.
Well-
everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's what, it frustrates me that
Well, it
those
may
rules don't
frustrate us,
apply to
but
them.
I don't think we
I
can.
think Newton did a public-private partnership like that, and that's what they're called, a PPP. And I think what they did was they developed an entire tract of land as the development, and because of the approvals for that tract of land, somehow the station was developed as part of that, and that was approvable. I don't know
I'm curious if it's the technicality of leasing, not owning.
Mhm.
And, even if you lease with the option to buy for $1 at the end of a 30-year lease, it would be like.
You still gotta get
mortgage.
somebody to upfront
And
the
That's
money.
what I think the problem, that's the issues. But it's just a thought I had. I didn't know if it's worth looking into, if there's a legal way to do it. If it could be a 30-year lease from someone, and then you purchase it for $1 in the end of the lease. You have an
But
option to
you,
purchase.
let's face it, you have to do subterfuge. You have to find somebody who's gonna do this for you so you can
Well,
lease it.
Right, I want
mean-
to share the thoughts that I have, because I don't
Yeah.
know if
Well,
if there's a way, if
I
any
hear you, and
convertible way, if there's anything. to
I think
do
our
with it.
best bet is to really work hard with McGovern and really work hard with Gobi and see if we can try, because let's face it, we have a very small community with, let's face it, limited resources, a per capita income that is probably in the low 25% of the of the state. We're not east of 495. And the western part of the state has poor economic development. We're part of that, really. And I would say that we have a chance, I think, of getting some federal or state funds. Where did it? Everybody else around us pretty much has gotten something, so I would spend my time, okay, as a selectman, going after the politicians and hoping.
I don't think that's something we can do without it. I don't know
Yeah.
how we come up with that type of,
And Ted can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a lot of the federal funding, when it comes to the public projects like fire stations, if you're shovel ready, you have a much higher
Oh, yes, I know.
chance of getting it
Shovel
than
ready,
just asking for
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
Shovel ready,
Yeah,
absolutely.
shovel-ready would mean we'd have to go to design.
Yeah, you finish the design and you know the numbers and you say, this is what it's going to
Yeah.
be. And then the pressure's on us to get the numbers right.
Right,
And
yeah.
we do. But I'll just back up for 1 second. Townsend, we built them a substation, but their main station, Sterilite, which is a company in town,
Yeah,
paid for the entire
yeah,
station.
well, they've built everything in the town,
Yeah.
let me just say.
Yeah,
Having worked,
Sterilite's huge out there.
Yeah, having
Yeah,
worked
so I
at-
mean, there
out
are
there.
ways of doing it, I guess, to your point, there are ways of doing it. I don't know exactly the business model behind it.
We don't have a Sterilite, so
Yeah, yeah.
that's-
And, well, and we don't know whether Sterilite paid prevailing wage,
Yeah.
because it was
yeah,
town building, I don't know.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, but certainly, and, you know, everybody says, well, $16 million, you couldn't possibly do it. But you've built schools in this community, okay? I mean, admittedly, with 50 and 60% reimbursements.
Well, that's the
Okay.
thing, if we'd have to see some.
A good
some
grant.
grant money that's gotta be, in, you know, half of that would be awful nice, but it's still, funding $8 million is 1.25 a year of our total revenues, that's, you know, if it's split out over 30 years for people, it's
Well,
not
it's-
that huge an increase.
Well, it's gonna have to get spread out over
But-
30 years.
Well, I know, but-
We know you bond it, that's the way
Yeah.
to do it, yeah.
Right, but it, you know, depending what the number is, and you get too high of a number, and a lot of these homes.
Well,
it's gonna-
the thing it has to be, the community, I mean, I don't know exactly what the full community believes, but I would tell you, everybody that sees me says, Maureen, these places are dumps. These people are working in environments that are unhealthy to them, and we want them to, you know, to protect us.
I had this argument with the old board years ago, when we
And,
talked about the police station, the public safety building getting built, it said this, we didn't have an operating bathroom down there, it froze up most of the time,
Oh,
there's no shower, there still is no fitness room, which is NFPA required for
Yeah.
firefighters,
Well,
there's
yeah, I
no
think
bunk
if-
room, there's no, you know.
If I can speak on behalf of the committee, I think the committee worked hard with Ted. You know, that's a big number, and we recognize that's a big number, but this is not an elaborate station. I mean, these were pretty much basic
Yep.
needs, and I know Ted's designed some beautiful stations that are fairly fancy and elaborate. And
This
what
isn't
we're
one of
asking for here, this is what we
Basic.
need today, basic
Yeah.
station. And it has some nice stuff, don't get me wrong. but
Well,
it's
I mean, when you
luxury
compare it to what you have to operate in now, I mean,
Right,
this is like,
right, the Taj Mahal.
yeah, the Taj Mahal, but
I
I,
think,
If
I-
we blend some topics here, we have a notice from Ware that they're not, or from Hardwick, they're not
Yeah.
gonna hire Ware anymore for fire, ambulance coverage. Does that mean that's coming towards us?
no, West Brookfield.
West Brookfield, I was gonna say, but, you know, as we are already servicing two other communities, at least in part of major fashion in EMS, it may open up federal funds to us, because as the department's expanding, we have the need to have bunk rooms, we have the need to have overnight personnel. And, you know, this one town is doing more of a regional service, and it may open up.
there's no question.
And that's something, if we have discussions with Gobi and with Governor
Well, they'll,
Berthium about this.
well, we
you
can,
know,
we can
but-
certainly even apply for and easily get a community combat grant. I mean, they're pretty much, they're very eager to help people who want to do regionalized services, there's no question about that. The concern that I have, obviously, is the financial circumstances of the town. We have to make sure that our ducks are in a row. And currently, with our audits, I worry
need that
that
bond rate.
we will not be, you know, high flyers in the bond market. In other words, I would suspect we'll have to insure our bond if we get one. And so we're gonna need help from the state and the Commonwealth to fix the financial circumstances that allow us to get a Moody's rating. And that,
Hopefully the
I know
steps
you
we've
hear me
taken-
nag about this all the time, but I tell you, this is critical to the town. And the fact that we're having an opportunity to change treasurers right now, I think is a great opportunity for us to move some things forward. And I think we have to work really hard, the board, with the federal and state, our people who represent us, and work very hard to try to get funding for this, because our town can probably do half, but I don't know about full. And then we have to do an extraordinarily good job in explaining to people. I mean, the last meeting I was at, where the very small number of people voted to incur debt of $6.5 million, did so with a lot of criticism, not for us, but for, the sewer commission, others, the lack of information that was shared. And I think we have to do a really phenomenal job at the state, the federal, and also obviously the local level, because this is an absolutely critical need for our community, and we have to get it done.
I would put money down that probably if you took just 20 average people and asked them to back one of those trucks in that station, that 19 out of 20.
I don't even want to watch.
I'm not kidding. Would hit something in the process.
Oh, listen,
of trying to get it
I don't
in
even
the
want to
station.
watch.
It's one thing to get it in the door,
I know.
getting your angle straight going in the station with literally 1 to 2 inches on both sides, less with the mirrors passing through the cutouts in the wall.
Yeah.
The lockers that Chief Rogalski and I built years ago, when Bob was still a
Yeah.
kid, we built them out of wood, and there's
Well-
still what services the lockers down in that place.
Well, I look at this as, if I do nothing else as a select person, I will dedicate myself to this opportunity, because this is an opportunity for our community. And I know that there had been times in my career where, Greg, you've always said, Marshall just keeps on pushing, building new schools. And this is as important as any school I've ever had the opportunity to participate in its construction. So I will dedicate myself to working really hard to look at straightening out the finances with Jessica and the team, and then working as hard as I can with McGovern and Goby and Berthium and those people who have the opportunity to potentially help us like they helped Ware. Because Ware got a really good deal, and we're sort of in their, our per capita income is such that we should get attention. And with the infrastructure money, but you're right about the 650, it's going to be 700 by the time we're shovel-ready.
And five years ago, when they were talking about building the public safety building, starting with the police side, and I suggested they started with fire side, the comment was, well, the fire was just over $6 million, and the town couldn't afford that. And I said, well, you didn't ask them. That was 5 years ago, now 6 is 16. So, if we wait 5 more years, it's going to be something this town may never be able to afford to do. This is something.
I am one who never says never.
No.
I mean, we're going to have to work hard for it, but, small communities like ours, and depending on what Senator Hines, if Senator Hines becomes the lieutenant governor, that's good news for Western Mass. Very good news. And depending on, what happens, who replaces him, we need the Senate's help, because, let's face it,
Right. We need
the House, go to Boston, and that's where all the House power is.
And we'll hold off asking people to call their reps and stuff. Yeah, let's see what we, make sure when we ask them to call and we'll look into it, that we have a specific ask or after before we start flooding any state houses with calls at this point.
Well, it's not even that, it's you gotta work with them to find out what's available and what do we have to do
Right.
to position ourselves to take
Right.
advantage.
And then when we do that, then you ask the public
Yeah.
to reach out and
Yeah.
make phone calls and try to get us some help.
And some of the things that we need to get our own house in order, and, we're working on that, and we've started, in the right
discussed that,
direction.
And
Yeah.
clearly, we struggle with with those specific financial issues, which do tie back to the computer system and the accounting system, and hopefully this change is going to repair all of the.
Well, I would tell you
issues
that there's
we
all
have.
kinds of issues regarding everybody's, making sure they get their reimbursements on grants, making sure their expenditures are reported to the state in a proper fashion. To go, right now, what are we in April, well, the end of March, with a negative $317,000 free cash number because we didn't get our reimbursements in for grants. That's insane.
Well, as we know, the Chapter 90 issue on that was because of the system change. There was something silly like a
Well,
$29 difference
I-
in one account to the other, and it
But
got
you know what?
bounced
You know what
back.
you would have said to me if that was the school?
I wouldn't have
You
said
would
anything.
you would have said to me, Maureen, how many other school districts have that problem? And I could say, none, just me. And what would you say
Well,
then?
Chapter 90s haven't been an issue in
I'm sorry, Greg, I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody,
I just
but I
say they-
just know we have work to do, and
We do.
everybody has to do their part.
We do, and I'm hoping that when we get this the computer software changed over to one program for everyone, that
It's
it's
gonna
gonna
help.
straighten out a lot of the issues. It's
Well,
gonna
it's gonna-
take away, it's at the very least gonna take away a lot of the excuses we've had for things not functioning in the past, which will be easier to button them up, so. Sam?
I'd like to ask Ted about general building nowadays. Do you design and build buildings that are net zero in regards to energy? And the reason I ask, is that something that one could expect for $16 or $17 million?
So net zero buildings are, and there are different types of net zero buildings. Net zero is making the building have as little or no carbon footprint as possible, right? So all electric buildings, for example, or buildings where you've taken what's known as the embodied energy, reusing parts of the buildings that have been there for some period of time. Yes, you do, we do design those buildings, and we do focus on those buildings. That is not included in this budget analysis right now. Net zero buildings are, can be substantially more expensive depending on criteria that we don't really know yet. For example, in Cambridge, we're making an all-electric building. It's a 1932 fire station, and we're insulating the building. And once you insulate a building that's never been insulated, there's infrastructure inside the walls that has to happen. But to make it an all-electric building and get rid of the gas supply, we needed to rely on Eversource to provide all the power. They didn't have enough street power, so now we're putting a substation on the property for that. So until you do a thorough analysis of the building specific, you don't really know. But what I'll say, and I'm a fan of net zero, I promote it, it does have cost implications, and it does add cost. If there were, in Vermont, there was a hockey rink just built in Brattleboro, I think, where they're talking about it being net zero, but it's not really net zero. It's because of the way Vermont's energy code is written, they're able to categorize it as net zero. And so the building is going to be, to meet the energy code today, it will be markedly more improvement than any building that the town has. I think it's 5 years or so out where there's a projection where the state is trying to make all their buildings net zero. I don't know that that's going to land in the building code. They're trying to put it in the building code. I don't know that that's going to land because I don't know that the infrastructure is there for that to happen statewide in the energy grid and many other systems. So it's something we do. It's something that I'd love to do. There are cost implications.
Well, the reason I ask is that the police department, I don't know how many years it's been up. Do you know how many years? It's cost us cost the town $30,000 a year for electricity. So if it's been up 7 years, it costs us $250,000 for electricity. That would be unfortunate nowadays to build a building without consideration because electricity charges are not going to go down.
Right. And those things are all taken into account when we're moving into that arena. But again, if we're doing net zero, creating green energy on site is one of the criteria. So geothermal wells, right, is one piece. That's an expense that wouldn't be accounted for in a building like this. Solar power, another one, right? So there are pieces that we'd have to consider.
I hope you would.
Right, we'd love to.
Anything more you need to present? Should we have more questions, or
I think I'm good.
Bob, do you have anything to say or comment?
Well,
or
what's
talk
the
about?
next step for us? I mean, is there what happens next? What will you guys be working on anything, or will we just be trying to get money? We'll be looking at financing strategies. What's the next steps for the or did the feasibility study end?
So this is the.
This is the feasibility study, the end of the feasibility study, right? This report, we can give you printed versions, digital
Okay.
versions, however, and give you any sort of background information for any of those pieces. We can present it at town meeting. I'm happy to come to other places and as part of the feasibility study, make clear to the townspeople what's happening and why this is required. I think, I think the firefighters' health, chief and any other firefighters that are on the team, their health is at risk in this building, in the building they're in now.
Oh, I couldn't agree
And
with
so-
you.
And so I would like to present that to people and explain to them that that's the real critical reason why this building is needed. So we're gonna wrap this up, give you printed versions where
Yeah.
Jessica will invite us to town meeting or wherever else
Yep.
we need to present, and we're happy to do that. I talk at conferences about fire station design. I'm gonna be talking in May in Chicago, and sometimes there are grant administrators at those places, and so I'll start to poke around and ask questions about that. So I'm not going away.
Tell me a little bit about the design phase. One, when would we, what kind of vote do you need from the community to start that? And what's your guesstimate on if we pick the most recommended, say the Mechanic Street slot, where we don't have to, acquire land?
We can take the information that we have here and roll it into a schematic design pretty quickly.
Okay, now, have you been through the process where we've, in our RFQ or RFP, did
Yes.
we ask for design as well as?
Yes, we did.
So we're all set to go?
Yes.
Perfect.
So really, you just
Okay.
need to vote and say, we're going to move forward. We continue the process. We just take what we've done now and we focus on Mechanic Street and we.
I just said that, I don't know
Yeah,
if that's
no, I
what,
understand.
okay, now, so you must give us a guesstimate of what you think design will cost.
It's actually in this budget, the architecture and engineering fees, it's 1.4 million,
Is
1.36.
8% a typical expense?
Sorry?
Is 8% a typical expense?
Depends on the
for a
team, but
building?
yes, it can be 10 or 12, I mean 10 or 12% at times.
What drives that number up so much? As you said, you'd be ready to get the design going very quickly.
It's the team size, so if we need, so I don't, this is just sort of a generic number. We have, structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing.
Are you in-house mostly, or are you,
No, we have consultants.
okay,
Consultant
and
team,
so
same
then,
consultant team that we're working on in many other stations.
okay. And so once we get design and we're shovel-ready, which would be our opportunity to go out to bid for construction. Now, we would be able to access grants before we went to the construction phase and bid for construction?
Ideally, because you want to,
Yeah.
you can't sign a contract until you have the dollars.
The dollars
in hand,
in-
right?
yeah,
So you
yeah.
want to have dollars in an account, the treasurer can
Yeah.
sign off and say,
Mhm.
the money's here, and then you can go to construction. So our work, if we were to start today, in 9 months, we would have a set of biddable documents. right?
Okay, so it'll take you 9 months for
9
design?
months, basically, and that.
So we really have to come up with $1.4 million.
Basically, yeah.
Okay,
And in that process, we would be meeting with a building committee or whomever.
Yeah.
Once a month, meeting with the chief, probably weekly or every other week, and going through the design and making sure all the parts and pieces fit together.
so when we talk with representatives, legislative representatives, we can say, we could be, bid documents, okay, could be by this time next year?
Certainly.
Okay,
So,
That wouldn't-
I mean, this is that, yeah, I mean.
They're spelled out in the timeline in the electronic pack.
oh, okay.
They have the whole timeline spelled out for when.
Okay, I
the
guess I
documents-
didn't.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if it was here, then printed, and it's not.
Okay.
But it is in the.
I think it's here.
I'm sorry.
It's in the back,
I
it's
didn't-
scheduled.
It's.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
here we go.
So,
Yeah.
so the 5 stages of a project, schematic design is the starting one, right after the feasibility study.
Yeah.
And so we're saying 2 months for schematic design. To take those block diagrams and to get all the parts and pieces to fit together and make them real plans, building elevations, what is this gonna look like? There may be some community feedback, maybe some discussion that way. At that stage, we do a cost estimate, another cost estimate, and we say, here's the number, here's where we're heading, here's where we're trending. We either do some value engineering, or we don't, we see how the numbers are going. Design development, we do the same thing. We spend the summer doing design development. At the end of design development, we do another cost estimate. We say, here's where the numbers are trending. We know now materials, we've now selected some materials. We're starting to select major systems. We're deciding with net zero or not net zero. We know what the site's about. And so we have another cost estimate. In construction documents, that's another 3 or 4 month period. We do 2 cost estimates during construction documents. So we're checking, okay, you're specifying this pump, how much is that pump? And so we're always checking the numbers along the way and trying to get them in place. Bidding in January, February of this should be 23.
I would hope so. I was gonna
Sorry,
say.
This is a typo.
Yeah.
This is a typo.
Should
This
be
should be
Ja-
January, February
23.
23. It's a 6-week process, basically. And then if we're in construction, March of 23 is a kickoff just a year from now, and we finish May of 24. And move in would be May of 24.
So our next big conversation with the community is about design,
Yes,
and it's $1.4 million for design.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
And this does not, again, schedule does not include purchasing of property.
So we would have to, if we wanted to stay on this schedule, we would have to do at town meeting, annual town meeting, design. We would have to get money for
Yeah.
design. Okay.
That's right.
When we talk about purchase property, there also has to be demolition and site work, that's probably.
Well, if that's the
beyond-
recommended
That's
one.
what you had figured in there in your budget.
Yeah, right, but the schedule-wise as well, but once you're in a purchase and sale agreement, we can start design. Right?
Yeah.
That's a time where we've done that, we did that in Davenport, Iowa, we helped them buy 4 pieces of property to be able to build their station and the fire lane and traffic around it. And we had to stay quiet while they were negotiating, they did it in a quiet way. And a year later, we came back in and helped them with that negotiation, and we're sorting out the design during that time. As soon as they signed a purchase and sale, that's when we did the full-blown design, they were ready. So that's the only pause in the schedule.
If we go with that site.
If you go with that site, and that pause equals construction dollars on the other end.
Yep.
That's the obvious.
For those committee members here, you think the Mechanic Street site is the better site? You prefer that? Or you think uptown is, we obviously have a station uptown, it'd be beautiful, but
Yeah.
it looks like parking's better, the structure's better, easy to do down on Mechanic Street. I don't know.
So I could just speak that the Fire Station Building Committee unanimously voted as our recommendation was Broad Street. That was our recommendation.
Because,
Based on the design, the layouts, the looking at also the municipal lot, we figured into that, losing that. So that played into it. And then, as Ted mentioned as well, just the overall location being tucked behind versus being up in the center of town, being something that the town has to kind of appreciate and kind of make it more of the community. That was important to us as well.
And the other thing with the site that Ted presented tonight had the training room on the first floor. The committee envisioned that as a community room that any civic organization in the town could use that. could hold up to
well,
60
well,
people. We don't have-
aesthetically, I
Like Boy
would
Scouts.
agree with you. Aesthetically, I would say, if we could afford it. My only concern would be, I have no idea what people would want for that property. I mean, I don't know if it's $1 million property, if it's a $750,000 property. I have no clue about that. And obviously, we would have to run that up the flagpole very quickly at town meeting, and then get another $1.4 million for design. So we may have to be more pragmatic than I would like to be, because you know me, I like flags and fancy stuff around the common. Be first one to admit it. But, so,
And that was the big reason for that was the community room, because, we felt that would help out that's why it was.
no, I think it would look, I think constructed properly on the face of that North Common, it would be aesthetically, it would add tremendously to the center of town. I don't dispute that at all. We have a beautiful common area. It's just, we have to look at how quickly that land deal can be at least communicated to whoever the secret squirrels are that are gonna tell us, yeah, you can't. Because if the number comes in to the point where your feasibility people are going, ugh, I don't know. I know that you're discussing that, you're discussing it in private as appropriate, so.
So the construction documents include demolition of the building, just not purchase, or they don't
Yes.
include the
The demolition of the building
But no
is
purchase.
in there. Doesn't include hazardous material.
right, hazard, and
Right.
and the hazard is, that's the unknown.
That's the unknown.
And that would have to be worked out before P&S,
Yeah, yeah.
obviously, if we went that route.
Yeah.
That'd be part of your purchase due diligence, doing a 21E and
Yeah.
phase 1, phase 2, all that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah,
But that would mean, be difficult to go to a town meeting and ask for a purchase of the building. First, we got to approve
I know.
all the groundwork, so if they approve the purchase and you get past, the environmental, then you purchase a building, then you've got to come back and get the money for.
Yeah. Well, it's-
Unless one's contingent upon the other, and that's, I don't know how we can really do that,
I think it's a 6-month delay doing all that, I think, before we could, you know,
which, and that's also going to drive other numbers up significantly.
I would think.
Possibly another 5%.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
Yeah,
You know, it's another $800,000 that could go up.
but,
So that's the thing, I like the idea of that site as well, but I worry about oil there. I've seen after car accidents, a ramp truck come in and tip up, and we know what the vehicles look like coming from car crashes.
And we don't know what's underground at either site.
And,
We know it's
Right.
gonna cost 1.4 to 1.5 to design a station. We know that, that's a hard number. We need that money. We
but,
don't know.
well, you can't design it until you know where you're gonna put it.
You need to know which site to design.
Yeah, that's the problem, you know?
changes.
So we have to decide the place, and I say we, I mean, some recommendations about it. And if we don't really know if we want to purchase a piece of land, if it's environmentally, we don't want to bother with it.
So I would pose this to you guys that are here from the committee. Knowing that it could push out 6 to 8 months, get the environmental evaluated, and if it becomes a Superfund site, that could be a year or more. And we may be unobtainable if it's got issues. But, go ahead, Dennis.
When the town took over the transfer station, I asked that same question. Was that site tested? The answer I got was, well, we knew the landfill was there, so we know it's contaminated. And the town still took that property without test boarding. Who knows what was buried down there? Up here, I don't think it would have a fraction of what might be.
The difference between those two is gonna be the transfer station is still a transfer station. To break ground up here, we're gonna have to pass those soil tests.
We haven't done any
So if
borings on
they
the
start construction
properties.
and they start construction, they start pulling on contaminated soil, the smell and everything else is obvious, it's gonna shut construction down, and then it's gonna start a $1 million Superfund dig. Which, if the town owns it, we're paying for it. If an individual owns it and they find out there's something wrong, there may be Superfund money that if it's not affordable, by the owners, but.
And I think those are all conversations to have with whoever the real estate attorneys are between both parties.
Yeah.
Right, and you have just no idea
Well, and,
either one.
and what kind of requirements if we are the purchaser, what kind of requirements do we want to have met before we think about buying it? Because we might just say after, some preliminary stuff, I'm not interested. But I would guess that the old Center School property or the Mechanics School Street property is a ledge city,
Yeah,
be my guess.
yeah.
Well, you can see it on the ground over there.
Yeah, well, I would say, and probably, as you said, the, parts of the building that were burned are probably just buried there, I would guess. And the old cellar
Which is
holes.
probably the same thing with the church uptown. And
Yeah.
That's the thing, I think we're gonna have that. But my concern is the delay it may take to pursue the purchase of the property. And at least I don't know how long it takes to just evaluate the eco stuff. I mean, maybe it's a 2-week, a team comes out and they said, oh, it's clear, but maybe it takes a couple months. I don't know what the time delays do and what kind of expense that adds.
It's gonna be longer, it's gonna be months, not weeks.
Yeah.
To do the testing.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you'd have months of that after probably, if it went well, a month of negotiation to come down to a purchase agreement, and then a couple months of testing to make sure it's approved, ready for us to,
Well-
we wouldn't even make this town meeting for it.
No. If I were the
So
person who
it's-
owned the land, and after we began doing some preliminary testing, and if it looked like it was a real dog, I might be saying, I'm gonna gift this to the town. No, I don't know.
Right,
But.
and then you get federal funds there.
Yeah,
Somebody should ask the current owner, did they do any testing down there before they bought it?
I don't know. Well, that's being negotiated by lawyers and people who are
Right,
representing your,
understand, that's-
yeah, so I don't.
Popped in my head.
Yeah, that report would be something that would travel with it, but the fire department would have a report, would have a copy of it if it was a DEP report, I would
Yeah,
think.
there is not
Yeah.
a Superfund site or a
Yeah.
DEP
Yeah.
report, so
Yeah,
there's nothing that's registered.
Yeah, yeah.
We check into that.
Well, thank you so much. It was very,
Absolutely.
very useful and helpful.
glad to do it. Thank you.
No.
And so this presentation, I don't know exactly what you have printed in front of you. I think this is slightly updated, so I'm going to leave a thumb drive with you
Okay.
that has it, because it also has, I went through some number of slides, but there's another 100
We,
with all the other.
rather than, our moderator is kind of like who likes to move through the meeting, so
Yeah.
I would suspect that we would do informational sessions, you know what I mean, pre-town meeting, and then maybe an abbreviated one at the town meeting, so
Sure.
that we can make sure people have a clear understanding of where to from here. And maybe by then, we may even know what the site is you're gonna talk about, I don't know.
One good thing I'll mention about the site between Mechanic and Broad is that even if there's urban fill under the site, it doesn't always have to be removed. It's really just where we're digging, and a fire station basically doesn't have a basement,
Okay,
right? So we're not gonna dig into the ground. We
Just the
could
footing.
in areas other than the Apparatus Bay, but the Apparatus Bay and its immediate environment we don't dig below. So that's a slab, structural slab on grade. It's got to hold up big heavy trucks. You don't want anything underneath it. And so that's one plus.
And I don't know where the school was situated, but it might miss the whole footprint of the building.
oh, no, it was, no.
I mean, I don't know where it was.
I can tell you
You
where
can
it
see
was.
the front stairs are still there.
I don't know if they're still there or not, but
Yeah, they are.
yeah.
You can see it. The concrete stairs to that school, right, still on that top.
So,
So the last piece, I mean, obviously, with the timeline we're looking at here, we'd have to get town approval, which would be at town meeting, to go ahead with the design.
only if you're going to the Mechanic Street site. If you're going to the other site, I don't think you're gonna you're gonna have to
Correct.
purchase land, so the first thing we'd have to do is talk about purchasing land.
And you could advance design on the Broad Street site, but you're at risk for a lot of money.
Absolutely.
So
Oh, I would
don't-
never-
I would advise it.
No.
It's not a good idea.
So what I'm getting at here is, if we wanted to go to town meeting and approve money to have the plans on the Mechanic Street site, we can start with this timeline.
Yes,
If we elect to buy a property, we're looking at special town meeting, hopefully next fall, where we can try to purchase property. And then next town meeting would be next year, a year out.
well, unless you did
Which
a
is gonna
special.
bump all these costs
Yeah.
5 to 8%,
Yeah,
which is gonna probably add another $1 million to this.
no,
And delay it by a year. And if you guys were thinking of that aspect, does it still sounds better to go to Broad Street and delay it a year and $1 million at the minimum? Or do we move forward with it and look for Mechanic Street and try to keep the ball rolling?
Committee will have to meet and
Yeah, talk-
discuss that.
I mean, you,
Yeah, we won't make a decision tonight.
oh, no.
But I would say do that, because that's, you're looking at adding a year, just because of the meetings we need, at least a year, which is gonna add substantial funds. And that's assuming we don't have any issues with the property.
So my only question, I guess, would just be on, I guess procedurally, for the annual town meeting, in order to move forward with the $1.4 million for station design,
We have to have a
to
second.
allocate those funds, you have to have a site identified?
yes, because that's the only,
It has to
because
be-
they have to design for the site.
Yes.
Because as you well know, having the big, like Bobby said, having that meeting room downstairs, and a community room downstairs is very different than having it on the Mechanic Street side where it's upstairs and it's, you know, very different shape of building, it's different tiers, it's a completely different design for them.
I know, I wouldn't say
So-
start design, just allocate that money for station design wherever it is.
Well, if
But-
that's asking the community
Yeah,
to buy a
that's
pig in a
just-
poke, and I
We
mean,
asked the town last year for $100,000 to put towards cable, and I was amazed we got it. That's $100,000.
I thought that was a relatively easy vote. People were,
I was surprised. it was
Screaming
easy,
at us
but this
to do
is-
it.
This is a lot more than $100,000, and to say, you know, allocate the money, and we'll pick a site, and people, you know what I mean?
I've been to the meetings, I just
You-
wanted to know
you
procedurally.
know how it
if
might
was even
go.
an option, so.
It's possibly an option, but I don't know the legality of that. We might have to, you know, to get the,
Specific.
because the funds can be allocated, we decide we don't do the project, and they can be voted back into the coffers at a town meeting. And the funds don't have to be dispersed. You know, we wouldn't spend them until we know where we're going.
well, it's very
something
difficult to
that-
raise and appropriate funds that you don't know if you're gonna use. I mean, that's
Well, that's
a
the
hard
intent
thing.
to use it, but I'm saying worst scenario, something happened and
Well,
neither fund worked, the
Oh,
site
yeah.
worked, or.
But I really think that we, yeah, obviously, you got a lot of information. The feasibility study has worked obviously diligently to this point in time. We seem to have good leadership. So I would suspect that we will continue to work toward having a design number at a town meeting. And if you guys decide, no, we're gonna go with the other property because we just got such a deal, well, then maybe we're buying property and not doing design until 6 months later, so.
Right, and your schedule shows schematic design being done by May. We won't have approval for money till after that at the least, so it's gonna be,
No, we see, you'll go out to bid and stuff, and, when we're at that point, we're gonna go to bid. I mean, when we get there, we're gonna go to bid, and if we end up, not being able to, fund the construction, we'll know before that. I mean,
And I think this is a pivotal moment for the town as far as the way we want our common to look too, because if we go with Mechanic Tree just for the sake of getting it done, 30 years from now, is the town gonna kick themselves if it's a vacant lot and say, man, I wish we had put the fire station, I wish we waited 8 more months and built a fire station there versus having an empty lot.
my concern is, if it was just, if I knew the property was sound, if I knew that it was a reasonable, cost to accommodate the, I agree with you 100%. In 40 years from now, you're right, no matter what we do, most of us aren't going to be here anyway.
I'd rather see it on Broad Street.
I think we
Don't get
both
me wrong.
would.
No, I
I'd
agree
rather
too.
see it there.
I just think we'll have to, the committee should talk, but I don't necessarily know if we should rush in and just say, let's just go with Mechanic Street without doing our due diligence to try
Well,
to get it broad.
Well, you
and
have,
see what the time's.
well, see, you have to look at where the money is in the government,
That's true.
and where infrastructure money is floating, and who's got the power to give us money. And so, you look at the Hubbardston Elementary School, when you go by it, you say, wow, they really crammed a big school onto a tiny lot, right? And you're right, we wanted to move it, we wanted to take the pallet people, have them move along, and we were gonna put the school there. And then, no way, the grants would not have been available at a 78% reimbursement rate. We said, wait, it's going here, because the town owned the land, and do we have as nice a playground as we would have liked? No, but we got the school, and the town could afford it. So you have to sort of look at it, and if you go through the center of Hubbardston, you actually cleaned up that very ugly corner. So,
Yeah, I think the Broad Street is the better site aesthetically for the town.
Oh,
Don't get me
yeah.
wrong, we're gonna be happy whatever we get, we're gonna be thankful.
Well, I think it's gonna come down to I think everyone agrees, Broad Street would look nice, it would be
if we can
more
get,
functional.
if we can get enough information quickly enough, we might be
But it's
able to.
time and it's money.
It's-
right?
yeah.
It's not just the 6-month, 8-month
Right.
delay. What's it gonna cost to clean the site?
Yeah.
That's
If
the
it
question.
needs cleaning, that I think that's possibly puts it out of reach, but if it doesn't, if this owner that bought it now already, because it traded hands just a couple of years ago, and if that owner did his diligence, which
If.
I can't imagine you buy a place like that and not.
Oh, I can.
Well, maybe, I guess.
You think that was it, and sitting there doing borings all around the place? Absolutely not. They did a couple things where the old tank used to be and moved on.
So that's, yeah.
I mean, because if they did due diligence, the fire department would know all about it. They would know all about it because they would have been supervising it.
I don't know what they supervise
Reports
it.
on when they pulled the tanks out? And I'm trying to remember, that late 80s, early 90s, but they did the bus barn, Swenson's garage here, there was quite a few places in town they did it.
But my comment was really that if the funding, we don't know, right now, there's so much CARES Act money, and the government is throwing all sorts of community grant money all over the place. The time is right to try to get this, I mean, it's a good time to try to get this project
Time is
funded.
right, well, the Democrats are in, Greg.
And when the,
Oh, guys, wait, I just,
if another year rolls by, you don't know what's gonna happen for funding, if
No,
money's gonna be
true.
available or not available.
Yeah.
And that's the other concern for delaying, They can
Well, I
promise you,
agree.
yeah, we'll have a grant for you next year, we're
Yeah,
planning on
I-
this, and next year comes and there's no grant. And,
well, we know there's going to be grants, we just have to get in line for one
and
of them.
being shovel-ready,
Makes a difference.
gets us grant-ready, as we know, and that's why we've applied for the sewer grant with the way we did. And that's my only concern. I think everyone agrees you'd rather see it on Broad Street.
Yeah.
But I just,
Absolutely. And who knows, we might get real lucky.
And on behalf of the committee, Ted's company, TGAS, has done a great job. They worked on it.
Yeah, well-
So,
Thank you.
I think the committee's pretty happy with who we chose.
That's why you got picked.
Well, what we would ask from the selectmen's perspective, obviously, is to keep sort of in touch with us, either through the chief or the feasibility group, to say what grant you heard about.
Sure, absolutely.
Because that's of critical import to us, and that's something that the selectmen obviously will have the responsibility for chasing around.
Yeah.
So anything that you have, you're with the people, you're out to Chicago, you're going to hear some information. We can work our senators and our representatives and so forth, and McGovern is pretty, helpful into our area of community. We have a per capita income that will help us.
Yep.
Not that it usually helps us, but
Yeah, yeah.
it could help
Yeah,
us,
that's right.
because I'm guessing there are, ways in which we will, you can build whatever you want in Cambridge, and they can pay for it, and they will.
Yeah.
We'll have to look at Stan's suggestion too, and see if we can find a way to get approval for the design at town meeting pending the site, decision. And then maybe special town, we vote the site, and we already have the funding, and we're just, 4 months behind.
Yeah.
The
Well,
town meeting's not.
if it's going to be 1.4 million, no matter what site you put it on, if we can get the money, yeah.
Right, so if we're looking at, meeting in June and getting the money, or special town in September maybe, 3 months later, and we could approve it then, if we have the funds pre-approved at town meeting, and we can finalize the purchase, presuming we can get going with the study. I just don't think we'll get the study done
No.
and find out before town meeting to make a purchase.
It's only 2 months away.
Right, but the purchase would certainly be feasible by September.
Yeah.
And if we had those funds, as Stan said, pre-approved, it could be 1-2 punch and get going on it. And that would keep the costs reasonably close to where they're estimated at.
Well, what we have to do also is we have to do the money, look at the money if we
have-
didn't get a
yeah,
grant.
If we can't
And
talk to
see,
the town
what does it
about
look like?
funding it,
What does it look like in the town? How could we fund it? And if,
that discussion, whether or not the town's gonna go ahead and approve almost $1.5 million for the plans without knowing how we can fund the project, that might be a tough sell.
well, you have to look and
But-
say, this is the worst case scenario, if we go out for 40 years and it's ours.
Yeah. Well, that's, I don't, oof. I
Well,
don't
yeah.
even think about that number.
Never say never.
Wow.
30 years from now, it'll seem like pennies.
It will.
Well, if we divide 16 by 4, we get 4 million every 10 years, it's about 2.5 million per year. That's a 1/3 jump in our tax rate, that's a big override.
Yeah.
33% override.
Well, it'll be a debt
luck.
exclusion, not an override,
Well,
Numbers are scary. Lowell I don't know if you saw this article about Lowell, but they're building a high school. And
Oh.
in January, they were on schedule, on budget, and in March,
well,
$30 million
the price of
over budget.
schools is just out of sight right now.
30 million over budget. I thought that's just
Oh, that's
a
kind
lot
of,
more,
incomprehensible.
a lot more creature comforts in school than we'll have in the fire apparatus bay and other stuff.
I'm sure.
And a lot more.
well, necessities are in every building that we construct, for
Mhm.
sure, and, it's gonna be a challenging operation, but, it's always good to work, when people say you can't do it. Gives us enthusiasm to go for it.
I think there's nobody's gonna disagree with the fact that we need a station down there. Anyone that goes and visits
Well,
that
they're gonna
firehouse would be appalled to see that that's where we have trucks in that building that far surpass the value of that building. Individual trucks that surpass the value of that building down there.
When I pull my
And that's
car up, it
that's scary.
surpasses of the building.
Well, that's bragging, but
No, it's hardly bragging.
That's a valid point for people, as part of the community, to be aware of how many millions of dollars
Of
worth
equipment.
of equipment do we have that's in that building,
which
so
people
what
wouldn't
you're,
wanna
what
own,
you're protecting.
Well, we all have our work cut out for us, so, we'll
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I think this is where we need to be, and we've got some work to do.
Well, I just hope that if the feasibility study group, you'll stay sort of together, and you keep working on,
Fire station design committee is what.
okay, because obviously, somebody has to move forward on that
Yeah,
land stuff, so
well,
let,
keep it
keep us
going.
up to date on that.
Yeah, Ted's been in communication with Jessica, if he needs anything, she's
Okay.
able to get it from the
Right.
assessors.
Okay.
And then assuming we're gonna get to the design phase, Ted's gonna have questions here and there that the committee would have to answer, so you guys definitely gotta stay, if you don't mind, intact and keep apprised of what's going on. And Yeah, we'll have to start looking for funding and.
Looking for funding is
Find a
critical
way
for us.
with attorneys, real estate attorneys, or brokers to look into the property and see if we can get anything,
Yeah, not, some numbers.
something confirmed about that, and maybe even talk to an environmental company about what sort of tests we need to know that this is.
Well, I think
clear.
Ed can
don't
tell
know.
us, right?
Yeah.
Well, my concern just
So once
is,
again, we're not going
I ju-
down.
I just
but-
hope that the, who's ever talking to persons about land and whatever, says, the town of Barry's not gonna go in and do the testing. You wanna sell it to us, you wanna give it to me, I might come in and pay for the testing, but I, you know, because that's very expensive. So you're talking about, I don't know, unless the guy's a cajillionaire, he's gonna look for somebody else, you want the land, you test it. That's what he's gonna tell you, I think. Hope not, but,
Find out, I guess.
yeah.
So Ted, would you have any answer, what kind of testing we need for confidence that we can build there? What,
Well, building media is one, checking all of the caulking, all of the paint.
Good luck, sir.
Thank you, nice to meet you. All the paint, any kind of, adhesives, any kind of floor tile. There's a building media consultant that would come in and do all that stuff.
lead,
And you need-
asbestos mainly for that?
Sorry?
Lead,
Asbestos, yeah,
asbestos.
lead, asbestos, and PCBs, those are the three things.
PCBs.
And light fixtures, getting rid of fluorescent light fixtures, all PCBs now. So there's a number of things that are highly likely that it's all there.
Yeah,
So building media consultant or hazardous material consultant. And the other one would be a licensed site professional, an LSP, who would probably come in and they would hire a drill rig and they would
mhm,
drill in a number of different places and test the soil. Towns that think, properties that think they're clean aren't always clean. There was we did a project where the town engineer was actually the OPM, and when he was the town engineer, it was clean, and he has a report, and he knew where it was in the office that it was clean. But the regulations had changed so much that it was no longer clean.
mhm.
And they had a fuel spill on site, it was cleaned up. But in that ensuing 30 years, the regulations got tightened up and all the material had to be trucked off site. It was found out during construction, because there was a clean bill of health. So if there was testing from the 70s, that's one thing, and that's great that the EPA was looking around, but it would need to be tested today.
Yeah.
I wouldn't suggest relying on that just because of so an LSP can tell you all of those things.
And how expensive is that company typically to come test?
I would say in testing for those two companies, you're probably in the $15,000 to $20,000 range.
That's not too
It's
bad.
not big, it's not too big.
That's
The
not- that
LSP would be
doesn't
the more
scare me.
expensive. Yeah, the LSP would be the more expensive of the two. And I can recommend a couple of companies, we work with a bunch, but the LSP would be the more expensive. And they would be more time consuming, they would write a thorough report, and it would be much more confusing for everyone. That's what LSPs do.
And then we have to hope that during the construction, we don't run into another well, we could run into that on any
There's
site we
really no way
choose.
to test every location
Yeah.
when there's a building, right?
Right.
You drill close to the building, you drill where there might have been an underground storage tank, you drill in certain key areas where there's a dry well, if there's something in the bay, like there's a mechanics bay, I think, down below.
Yes, there is.
So you'd want to see if you could drill in there, that's a special drill rig. So it depends, and then you hope, yeah. I mean, you can, same with geotechnical.
Yeah,
You look for the ledge, you drill holes, you don't find any, and then when you're on site, you find all kinds of ledge. And so that's always, no one can see everything. And so, but those are the two primarily that you need, licensed site professional. And
Because we own Mechanic Street, we have to do that at Mechanic Street anyways before we wouldn't have to do that there.
you wouldn't have to do, well, you'd want to, actually. You'd want to, because if there's hazardous material in the soil, you can't dispose of that material at a normal dump site. It needs to go to a specialty place. So we're not digging a lot. We'd be digging less at Mechanic Street than we would at Broad Street. Primarily because digging at Broad Street, you're going to pull all the foundations out, and digging at Mechanic, you might not pull anything out. You might leave it there. But the new foundations you're putting in, you're gonna extract soil, and that soil can't stay on site, there's nowhere to put it.
Hmm.
So, and it can't go onto another site in town, you can't use that, fill in something else if it's contaminated.
Far less chance of that.
Yeah. Okay,
That's always been my only concern up there, is just because it's been a service station
forever.
for so long, and I know from being a kid working at gas stations, people don't always dispose of oil in the proper ways, and I've seen many people growing up that used to do it in their own backyards and dump it, and that oil goes down and gets water in it, and it just goes, and it goes everywhere. So, all right,
Okay, thank you
let's
so
wrap
much.
this portion up. Thank you,
Thank you all
everyone.
very much.
Thank you.
Chief, sorry.
Use of town property, community ban, I make a motion, we accept their
I'll
application to
second
use
that.
town pro-
I'll second.
Motion second to approve town use of property. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
All right. Take one more off the list. What did I get back to it? I just didn't want to hold everyone else up any longer. That's the only
Thank you.
bit of business
Have a safe
except the
drive
minutes,
back.
right? We have meeting minutes from,
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
thank you very much, Ted. Meeting minutes, open meeting March 7th.
I move approval of the March 7th meeting minutes, and also the March 7th executive session meeting minutes, but the executive session minutes not for release at this time, even after approval.
Second. So we have motion to second to approve these two meeting minutes as discussed. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The
I'll
next,
abstain, I wasn't at that.
All right.
So I'll abstain.
we have executive session meeting minutes, what I'm going to hold because
Yes.
that needs to say alleged in there.
Yes,
So it needs just to be changed.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
My spelling's probably not right on it, but just get the point.
Well, why don't you give that to Sandy,
Okay.
she will know that.
That's all. We'll change that executive session and we can release
I-
those next time.
Move
That
a-
cleans that up.
Move approval of the March 15th, 2022 meeting minutes.
Second, we have motion and a second for March 22nd meeting minutes. That's from the town meeting,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes,
Any,
What date?
on March
March
15th. That was the
You said 22nd.
oh, sorry,
Okay.
I did. didn't I?
2022.
2022, March 15th.
Who's second that one?
Dylan. Motion and second to approve those meeting minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for vote. All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
All right.
I would just, under reports, just indicate that the information that is under correspondence is available in your packet, and thus becomes part of the public record.
DOT, one of those is announcing our Chapter 90 funds tentatively at $428,529 for next fiscal year. And I think this issue with the treasurer is dead on right. We ought to make some sort of motion and say that the treasurer, Jessica looks like she might want to say something, that we can, spending 50 whatever cents to send an envelope back because somebody's bill was off by a penny.
Right, the treasurer wasn't aware of what had happened, and he has rectified the issue with the staff, saying that if it's under $1, don't worry about it.
Okay, so no need to address it.
No,
Okay, very good. We ready for our last portion here?
I think we're ready for Chief Sabourin. Sabourin.
Okay, we as we discussed, we advertised internally first for the full-time permanent chief of police position. We had one candidate, as we suspected we may, which is our current acting chief, Jim Sabourin. To that end, before we get into this, we know the candidate well. He's been interim chief for us, I believe this is his third time acting chief. First time interim, twice acting before. I have no doubt of his qualifications and records. I have no need for these questions for the candidate. And I would be prepared myself to move forward and offer him the job unless you two want to have a private discussion, we'll go to executive and do so. But this is what we anticipated doing, and we wanted to get to this point to make sure that any contract we have with this chief is catered towards him, not just followed through for the prior chief.
Well, what I would like to do is to ask the acting chief to come and, if we're Pease sat here for like an hour and a half, listening to fire stuff. I certainly concur with you, Greg,
Can I
that.
just get an input from Dylan as well?
Well, before, I just like to make a
Okay.
couple comments. Number one, not only have I become, very familiar with you and your operation and your ability to lead, and the work that you have done when you were subordinate to the previous chief, that you were always someone not only that he could count on, but that the rest of the people that you were leading could look up to. I have had numerous people reaching out over the past several months to say, hey, you better support Jim Sabourin because he's the kind of person that does a great job in our community. And these are people who don't necessarily know me very well, but sought me out because they knew that I would have some ability to ensure that you would have this position. I personally feel that their recommendations to me were done with thoughtfulness, that the people care deeply about this position and want very much for you to be in it. I concur with that. I concur with you, Greg. And while I feel badly in a way that the public doesn't hear us ask you a bunch of questions that would allow you to demonstrate your proficiency, but many of them have seen your proficiency actually in action, which is probably far more important and insightful than listening to me or to Greg ask you or Dylan ask you questions. So I certainly would agree that we could move forward with no hesitation on my part, and obviously the chair seems to feel the same way. So Dylan, if you have comments or whatever,
That was a time.
Well, I just want to echo exactly what you just said, Dr. Marshall. I've had many people reaching out to me specifically on that topic just to give their support to Jim here in his quest to be our full-time police chief. So I also don't think we need to go through the motions of asking a bunch of questions here tonight. I feel pretty confident with his candidacy.
Okay, so my suggestion would be that we spend some time and start to work on a contract, and we plan on the start date of July 1st, and as we had planned the interim to be through June, that's why there was no big rush. That'll give us plenty of time to come up with the contract and let him review and counter if need be, and figure out where we're going to be, and hopefully have this all well settled before June. And the contract can be endorsed at any point before that, and it'll just be effective in July 1st.
I would just
So-
ask you, Jim, since you've been here for so long a period of time, waiting to have this opportunity to talk with us a little bit about your background and so forth, which most of us know about, and also the work that you did in putting together your paperwork. I was with diligence, as most everything you do is. And anything else you'd like to share with us regarding this position? And
No, I mean, as you know, I've been here a long time in Barre. I'm dedicated to the community. I'm passionate about the town of Barre, and I just am passionate about the police department and want to make sure that we have a world-class police department here in town, and the type of police department that the town of Barre deserves.
thank you very much. Well, my congratulations to you, and my thanks for pursuing this job.
So we officially will make a motion.
I will move to elect
To offer the
Jim
job.
Sabourin to the position of,
We're going to offer him
Chief?
the job, we got to get him to accept it.
well,
Technically, I'm just saying, let's,
okay, he has to offer the position that he just said he wanted as chief in the town of Barre, effective July 1, 2022.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and second to offer the job of Chief of Police to Jim Sabourin, effective July 1st, 2022. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Maureen, would you like to do the honors?
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Assuming you would like the job.
Yes,
Um,
I accept.
And we will, thank you, we'll work on the contract
Yeah.
and, you know, see, I'm sure I'll want to make some changes from what John had in there and stuff, and you may want to make changes on your side. Just, you know, we try to keep it reasonable. I think mostly everyone we deal with in town is pretty reasonable in their requests. Every now and then, people throw outlandish things in there because they want something to throw away in contract negotiations, and that frustrates the heck out of me. I just like straightforward, what you really expect, and we say what we expect. I hate to play that meet in the middle game. So we'll hopefully offer a contract in that spirit, and any rebuttals coming the same, and we'll get this done
By July 1st?
before July,
You
hopefully.
guys know me well enough to know I don't play games, so I'm pretty straightforward in everything I do, so.
And I will add to the comments of people who obviously, when I was talking with people prior to the decision and negotiations to accept John's retirement early, a lot of officers specifically, you know, showed support for you to fill in that position. Not just many people in town, but I don't want to say all because I don't know for sure if I talked to all of them, but you're rest assured the department stands behind you, and it's good to see.
Well, I would tell you that I didn't, while I got many calls in support of you, I did not get one in opposition to you.
That's good to hear.
And, well, let's face it, in our world, in your job, it's hard to please all the people all the time. So congratulations, and thank you so much for wanting to be with our community.
Thank you,
Thank you.
thank you,
Have a good night.
thank you,
No speeding.
thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Dylan.
See you, Chief.
Have a good night.
You too.
Have a good night. Okay. I don't think we really need to start an executive session and
No.
discuss wages or anything
No.
at this point. We've had a good
I
enough
agree.
meeting tonight. We'll pick a shorter night to do that and look into it. Jessica, if you could, though, plan for giving us all a copy of the former chief's contract so we
Yep.
can review, and that'll give us a good place to start making marks on. and
Well, do
maybe-
you think we should have our attorney just look at it too, in case she thinks there's something we should look at or remove or add?
We'll take a knock at it. It's already been done with the attorneys to get to where it is, so we'll kind of kick it around first,
Okay.
and then we'll have them,
Kick it
you
back?
know, rather than do
Okay.
that twice and spend too much on the attorneys. Let's try to make our adjustments, and they can recommend how to, if we really make any or many. I don't think
Right.
there's a lot to make. But, you know, I'd rather have the chief feel this contract was catered towards him, not just a generic, you know,
Yeah.
copy and paste contract. You know, he deserves that as well, so.
And Jessica, thank you for following up on the treasurer's thing with that interim opportunity, because that will make a huge difference for us.
Oh, yes.
And that's the end of our recorded business, right? We're gonna
Yes.
get a selectman report. So Dylan, you want to start tonight? Am I signing this somewhere? I can't see where I'm supposed to sign these two.
I'll pass on a selected report procedure.
Okay.
One's going to
Okay, the only report that I have is just something that was on the agenda, which was the initial executive session. We do have a contract that has been drawn between the fire chief and at least the subcommittee of select board members who have met. And we would be ready to bring that contract to the board to vote at our next meeting. And we would do that in open session. And again, our attorney has reviewed it, and we have a couple changes in there from the previous contract, and we'll be making that public on the next meeting.
I received a email from somebody, let me get this straight. It was from, oh my gosh, it was from Eileen, about the COLA for last year. She was asking again about the pay. She seemed to think that the salary that was approved for her is different than what she was paid. And
Okay.
I said I'd ask, because I wasn't sure. I knew there was something hinky about it before, that someone hadn't recorded her salary properly, so when you were doing the COLA, it was off of the last recorded number, and that's what led to us, discussing her salary in general and adjusting it where we felt it should be. Just want to make sure, I don't know anything about it, but the statement specifically said, I'd have to open the email and get quoted, but the salary that was approved by the town was more than she was paid last year, is what she's stating. So we want to make sure that that's not true, because if there was a salary approved, we should pay what was approved. But I don't know. So
I believe we're
that's-
paying more now than was approved.
Now, well, absolutely, now we are.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to respond to her, so I wanted to bring it up to the board and look into it. And, I'll be glad to discuss it with her when we get the direct answer of what I
Right.
need to say about it, but
Yeah,
we can do that.
right, if you just want to forward me that email so I could understand what she's asking, and
Yeah.
then we can discuss offline.
So that's the only thing I wanted to bring up in open meeting, because it is the whole board's,
Yep.
right to know. And if it's all right with the rest of the members, I would just discuss it with her when I get the answers from Jessica.
Okay.
Just follow up in person as she reached out individually,
Okay.
just follow up in turn. She said she's already talked to you, I think, about
Yep.
some other things as well, so. Other than that, I think I'm gonna leave it alone,
Okay,
keep this evening rolling.
I guess we would entertain a motion to adjourn?
Not yet, we're gonna
Not
let
yet?
Jessica
I-
have.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I may
Jessica.
have a couple things. to
Oh
mention.
darn, I thought we could just skip right over you tonight.
And you do have two of these to sign, it's just this top two here. Licenses.
So today I was approached by the Pine Ridge Reservation. They have their chief coming out from South Dakota, somewhere out there. And he's coming to Barre to look at the museum and the library, to see some of the artifacts contained. And I think the community knows that there's been some discussions back and forth between the library and the Department of the Interior and this tribe, about ownership and whatnot. But they contacted me today because he will be in town and they would like to reserve the town hall for next Wednesday, April 6th, from 2 to 4:30 p.m. And they expect somewhere between 100 and 200 people in attendance. So I just wanted to let the board know that came to me today, and if you would like me to request that they submit a formal request for their next meeting, for your next meeting, they still will have time to do so in order to reserve the town hall for that next Wednesday.
Procedurally, I'd say yes. Yes, have them submit the proper forms.
Right. Like I said, they just approached me today about that, so I said I would discuss it tonight with you all, because they didn't have enough time to fill out the paperwork. Fred and Olive, which is a local business on the Common, it's actually located on Broad Street in the P&F building. The business owner, she has organized an Earth Day cleanup for April 23rd. She's putting all of the details together, I guess. She's trying to pull it all together, but she has reached out to the Board of Health, myself, and the town clerk, just for some assistance, making sure that she didn't need any, permission, or basically how to go about working with the transfer station. And so seems to, she's out there starting early, trying to get the information together, to make sure that she has a very good event. And again, that's on April 23rd, which I believe is a Sunday. I know that April 22nd, I think, is technically Earth Day. But she has some materials that we will be circulating, whether that's on social media, their website, some combination thereof. I've also met with the Barre Trails Committee, who Steve Salvador is a member of, and also the New England Mountain Bike Association. They approached me. I've had conversations with them on and off over the past almost 2 years that I've been here, And they approached me a couple of weeks ago because there was a grant opportunity that they had, that they were interested in applying to, and their focus has been on a public and private trail development. So they've developed a lot of trails for mountain biking or hiking or walking on private land with partnerships with those property owners, but they've also kind of dabbled in the public land. So the trail, Town Farm Road Trails has been like kind of one of their staples of what they've developed. So they reached out to me because they wanted to apply for a grant to help further develop signage, parking, and other assets to go into the public development side of things. So that includes the Town Farm Road. And they were looking at, there's a property that the town owns that was an old gravel pit, and that is on the back side of Nornay Park. So they were looking at potentially developing some trails in there. I also met with the Board of Health or their administrative assistant and the Leicester Regional Public Health Coalition. Last week, we met with their new epidemiologist, which again was hired through a grant. Barry's been a part of the LRPHC for almost a year now, and that's I believe it's either a 3-year or 5-year partnership, and they had just received another grant for an epidemiologist, and they are looking at potentially going forward with a community health assessment. They're really focused on mental health and, drug abuse and those kinds of things. So that was a good kickoff meeting to meet that new staff member and just talk about some of their goals and ideas. One of the main reasons why I wanted to become a part of this regional partnership was because of the ability for them to focus on public health as a broader subject and not just, Title V's and health inspections, as I think is like the traditional view of typical like Board of Health offices. The LRPHC has been able to show us that there's a lot more opportunities for public health in communities, and I think that they've made a big step, and this is the step that I was really hoping that they would be able to take in bringing on that epidemiologist to focus on hopefully the tail end of COVID. And also just like some more futuristic thinking about how we can help our community in other ways. They discussed also like hoarding issues and how to help, organize the community to have days where they either educate the public about hoarding issues, or they offer like days where they do like clothing drives, and so people can start purging out some of their clothes or other materials. So that's just kind of like in their thought process over the next couple of years. And lastly, I did have a meeting with our the Strategic Solutions Group, who's going to be managing our ARPA funds, and I thought that was a pretty good and productive meeting. They did offer, as a part of their services, to help the community, to help the board do like a kind of a public meeting, which I would definitely recommend. I'm still working on getting together like some materials to send out to all of the departments to get an idea of like what they would like to see the ARPA money spent on. And I've already had several conversations with different department heads, so that ranges from the cemetery, commission is looking for a new software to help update the old cemeteries and seeing like how different cemeteries are plotted, because a lot of that information is missing. So there's a lot of good ideas. The police department, with Chief Sabourin, I've had some conversations about different goals that he has long-term and how ARPA may be able to fit in that. So I'm definitely going to be sending out a formal survey to everybody to get their ideas, and then also would like to partner that with some engagement with the public to get their ideas, whether that is something like helping out the mountain bikers and they're building the trails, or, you know, there's been a need for some playground equipment in the community. So different things like that. And so I hope that we can just all mesh both ideas and both ambitions into one, like, public meeting to kind of get everybody's ideas out on the table. And then ultimately, the board will have a tough decision on how to divvy up all that money. And as of that, I think I'm all set.
Okay, and I saw we all got the email about the drainage concerns down by.
Yeah.
Oh, Stetson
Oh,
Road.
Upper Deck.
We need to look at that and see
Yeah.
with the commission, but it sounds like when they talk about a drain on the edge of the parking lot, that it may be on the property of the parking lot and going under the building structures. It may have been, at least on that side, privately owned drainage. It might not be town drainage, so I don't know, you know. Certainly wanted to make sure we talk about it a little bit and bring it up at the commission meeting and you know, maybe if we forward that email to Jason Pimentel directly. And that's one of the issues, by the way, I've talked about. DPW generally goes to an inbox where everyone in the world that says anything to the town of Barre goes there. So if we want to make sure he gets emails, we should send them to jpimentel@townofbarre.com specifically. Because I've been guilty too of forwarding things to DPW, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's getting seen. I think there's a lot of
Okay.
stuff they get down there, otherwise it may be some of our issue with communications, but.
And there was also that issue with the Mill Restaurant, about the water issue in the basement.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to sell that building, obviously, and so they've provided some background from, I don't know, an agency that does water testing to say it looks like town water to them. Jason has been there on several occasions and feels that it's not a town water issue. But, I mean, that's, I think, something that's still, I hate to use this, bubbling up as an issue of concern.
Right. and
So
it's-
another thing we should bring down to the meeting on the 23rd.
Right, and it's, you know, ultimately that's gonna fall
Yeah.
under the water commission. But yeah, make sure that gets brought up, and, you know, it's frustrating sometimes. We get outcry from people about things, and some people think we don't respond or take it seriously, but there was one we had, and I'm not even gonna, I don't care to find the person's name right now because I don't wanna call anybody out, but it was about a water meter leaking into their basement, and that they were in tears in Jessica's office about this issue. And I implored Jason to go down there, just do me a favor, go down there and freaking look. And the bottom line is, you know, we own it, the street, the line in and the meter belong to the customer. It's our meter, but they pay to put it in, you know, the plumber maintains it. It's not the town's issue as a standpoint. I said, well, just go see what she's talking about. And it looked to him like it might even be just condensation in the meter. They had a paper towel under with some random drips. From the letters I read, I had pictured inches of water flowing into their basement, drips off the meter on a paper towel. So it's hard to gauge just from a letter what we really have there until someone goes and looks at it and sees. Some of the comments in that letter we got was about when there's heavy rains. Well, when there's heavy rain, School Street has 1.5 inches thick of water flowing all the way down School Street, bringing rocks and debris and coming down Williamsville. The other way, as I've discussed in many of the meetings, I want them to take care of the runoff on that one side of the road because it just washes boulders down the road. So when we have heavy rains in town, everything floods out. I mean, so it's hard to get too worked up about it, but I think we definitely want to bring it up down there and make sure they're aware of it and see what they have to say about it. If complaints persist, we can always try to get down there when it's raining and look ourselves and see what they're talking about.
Mhm.
But, you know, one of the issues before we paved one of the roads in town last year was that someone had a lot of water in their yard down off the road. They're worried about the drainage, and it turned out they crushed a cross drain under their driveway when they paved their driveway and stopped the water from getting out. It's this got nothing to do with the road. So, you know, try to just be metered in our responses, and I don't know if anyone's responded. I didn't respond to these people. You know, I try not to when we're all messaged onto the emails, but just bear in mind, it's not always our town failing. Sometimes it's just, you know, really not our issue, and they're hoping we'll take care of it for them.
Well, sometimes they don't realize it's not their issue.
Right, sometimes they don't.
I mean, I wouldn't, not having been a water, you know, person who has water from the town water, I would have thought that we own the meter Just like if the meter goes south on National Grid, they're fixing it.
Well, it's the town's meter, and if it's a
Yeah.
defective meter, the town would replace it. But if there's a leak with anything else, it's up to your plumber to take care of it.
Really?
It's in your house, your
How
plumber.
about if it's the leaking from the
If the-
meter itself?
Then it's the town would
Okay.
fix that.
So,
They'd replace the meter for you.
yeah,
But
okay. Well,
it sounded like their complaint was the water was coming in around the pipe.
oh,
Well, that's an issue for your sealing your foundation.
yeah.
Speaking from construction, that's an easy one. Get some hydraulic plug around your pipe and stop the
Yeah.
water from coming in. But that wasn't even the case. It was just drips off the meter itself,
Okay.
which it seemed to be probably compensation. So at least that one was resolved, and I think they do these things. Sometimes not the same way we'd handle it, maybe not as diplomatically, but let's face it, no one down there is a politician. We're not politicians, but we're playing at it here. But you know what I mean, we have to look at it in a different approach than they do, and they're like, well, it's not our problem, it's, call your plumber. And without really giving that explanation that some people are looking for.
Mhm.
So we try.
Try.
We try. Sandy, you got anything?
Nope.
Anything else, Jessica? No. Hearing nothing, I would move we adjourn.
Second that.
Motion second to adjourn. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.